All right. Good evening. Right, at this moment, I'd like to call the meeting of the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee to order at 7:02 PM on Thursday, March 2nd, 2023. And we will begin. I will invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Why do we do that? You sure?
Yep.
Sorry, I was just doing a little Zoom there. Okay. All right, next up, we have our before we get started, I should just let people know that this meeting is being recorded and is being live streamed on HWCam. At this point, we're going to open up to citizens' comments. There don't appear to be anyone in the room that's going to be offering a citizen comment. Okay. Mr. Tracy, do we have anyone on Zoom who looks like they want to offer a comment?
Nobody online.
Okay. All right, in that case, I am not going to give the whole spiel about citizens' comments because it looks like there's no one available to do that.
Nope.
And we will go ahead and close the Zoom link.
Zoom is closing.
Okay. Moving right along, Anna, I'm going to ask if you would be willing to read a portion of our school committee protocols.
Of course, Dana.
Thank you.
Of course. As elected members of the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee, we, including the superintendent, accept the high honor and trust that has been placed in us to ensure that the students of the district receive the best education possible. To that end, we hereby commit to the following in the conduct of our business. Number 14, recognizing the importance of honoring these protocols, members will respectfully remind each other when they get off track.
Thank you. Julia, I know I didn't actually officially ask you, but I hope that you'd be willing
I saw
to
it in front of me and I thought,
excellent, to read a portion of the mission statement.
The Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee will lead and inspire a district that is a source of civic pride and municipal engagement to serve the community for generations to come.
Thank you. Okay. Next up, I'm happy to say that we have our student representative, Eliza Bassam, is here to give us a report.
Thank you. So I'm not sure, Ms. Tracy, do you have the slideshow or no?
I don't.
Okay, then that's fine. I can just,
You have a Mac?
yeah,
You can jump on.
it's shared with you.
What do you have it called?
Student activities 3.2.23.
Got it.
I think something is off in
Yes.
the IT world.
It's not gonna let me connect.
I can go without it if you want.
Could you plug
You
in?
can mirror. If you have a Mac, you can mirror it to the Buca Rover.
What's it called?
Buca Rover. Mine's blocking me.
Yeah, we all had trouble.
There you go.
We all had trouble on it. There you go.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Oh my gosh, these were like a year
Gotcha.
ago.
All right, so student activities for the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District. So first off, we have the high school For the classes, the two main updates is the senior class is having our Six Flags field trip on May 19th, and the field trip forms have been handed out and are coming back to us now. And then the freshman class is selling HW slides if anyone wants a pair. And the whole school had the speaker who is a author of Warriors Don't Cry and member of the Little Rock Nine speak today, Melba Beals, and that was amazing as an audience member. And then we also have the speaker series run by DECA, which featuring Mrs. Dolan, but that is currently being rescheduled as that landed on the snow day. As well as we also have DECA States next week, starting Thursday, and the robotics competition is occurring between those dates. It's a couple days. And then the NHS bake sale was yesterday, which was successful. And sports, it's playoff season, everybody. So HW Cheer took home first place in their division last week.
Awesome.
Very impressive. And then the boys hockey is tonight and the girls hockey was last night. And there are several other sports that are also participating, so go check those out if you can. As well as many of you probably saw tonight, the play run by the high school was also performed tonight and is competing on Saturday in North Reading. Next up, the middle school. So first off, Charlie Brown was performed by students, and they're now moving on to the one acts, which is going to be in a competition in the spring. They also had multiple writing winners for both the Write the Hook competition run by the Hamilton Wenham Library and a Scholastic winner. In addition to those, we also have 8th graders have activities being held that build their leadership, community, and problem-solving skills. And finally, Common Corners have been implemented, meaning for students who have anxiety or sometimes get distracted, they're able to go into these corners and calm themselves down so they can enter the learning environment ready to learn. Next up, Winthrop. So Winthrop published their second edition of Winthrop Writes. Winthrop also collected 600 pounds of items for the Accord Food Pantry, both food and personal items. Very impressive. The 100th day of school celebration raised $370 for Northeast Veterans Outreach. Today, the celebration for the Read Across America Day occurred, with grades reading favorite picture books together. And finally, they're having a speaker, Chris Polos, I believe you say his name that way, is motivational speaker and a bike stunt performer, and that will be held in assembly where they're teaching students about safe risks to take and courage. Next up, we have Cutler. The 5th graders presented MLK's I Have a Dream speech, and according to their principal, there was not one dry eye in the audience. Then we have the week before vacation, they launched a composting program which has reduced their waste by half, and they're hoping to advance that to all the other schools at some point in the near future. And then Cutler and Winthrop totaled 1,000 pounds of food and personal items for the Accord Food Pantry in their fundraising. And finally, we have Bucher, which just held their mid-year literacy and math tests, and they're using those to analyze their classroom techniques and build on those. And then they are holding their own Accord Food Pantry collections, and those are happening until today. And then finally, before February break, they had an I can't say that word, sorry, experiential, learning day, where they had students use animation and Legos and other toys that also build on students' life skills and curiosity, and it was a big hit. And that's all I have for the district as of now, but a lot of things happening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Eliza? I have one. Did you say the high school was the Melba Beals presentation? Was that the whole school got to go to that presentation?
Well, it was optional, so a student in 9th grade honors reached out to her to ask her to come and speak, and she agreed over Zoom, and I believe the Ed Fund funded that whole experience, and students had the option to go, and many did attend, and then all of the Mrs. Burnett's students were in attendance from what I saw. It was very, very inspirational.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a great opportunity.
Yeah, we were able to ask questions, and she also gave a recount of her experiences and also her experience writing the book.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else have questions? All right. Always appreciate the update very much. You are, of course, always welcome to stay. However, if you might have something else to do, we would understand.
I think I should probably do my homework, but
Maybe.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, next up, I feel like we got started. I feel like, Mr. Tracy, we sort of got started, and I didn't get a chance. I wanted to introduce Beverly. But of course, I've forgotten your last name already. Zagari. So Beverly is joining us as our new recording secretary. We're very happy you're here. Thank you very much. All right. All right, moving right along to the consent agenda. Does anyone have any items that they'd like to hold from the consent agenda?
You did, you wanted to hold it. Go ahead.
Okay, I want to hold the Ed Fund mini grant digital music production.
Okay. I am going to hold the minutes from November 3rd. Or anybody else holding anything? Okay, I think we're ready then, Amy?
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee approves the consent agenda as written with the exception of the Ed Fund mini grant and the minutes from November 3rd.
Second.
Second by Jen Carr. All those in favor? And that is unanimous of the 6 members who are present, and the motion passes. Anna, you held the Ed Fund mini grant?
Well, I held it partly for the usual reason, which is just, I feel like every meeting we're approving some big, new, awesome thing from the Ed Fund. And it's kind of to the point now where I think, as many have thought, like, what would we be without the Ed Fund? The number of things that they're providing support on that the district is, for a variety of reasons, unable to provide the same sort of matching support. I always like to call it out. On this particular one, though, this is something I've noticed recently. I'm so curious about the 99 cents when we're doing these grants of things. As someone who's written grants, I'm just
Yes,
like, why the 99 cents? And is that
They
pertinent or
reach out.
relevant? Like, can we just round up to the nearest whole dollar on these things? Does that even matter? Yeah, I'll donate the penny. I will donate the penny.
I can only speak from my own past experience on the Ed Fund, which again has been several years now. But the requests do, if you see it's an itemized, they really do
I know, it's
request
impressive.
specific, very specific, that, so yeah, that's just the way the grant goes.
It's just hilarious to me. So I was just more curious but mostly just to say thank you to the Ed Fund for really subsidizing the district in literally millions of different ways at this point. So thank you.
All right, it looks like we're ready for a motion.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee approves the Ed Fund mini grant as listed in the agenda.
Second.
Second by Anna? Is that you?
Yes, I
Yeah,
second
by
that.
Anna.
Sorry about that.
Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? And that is unanimous of the 6 members present, and the motion passes. So I held the minutes from November 3rd. If you look on page 3, I think this is really just these were done to try to catch up because we had that gap in our coverage. So I think on page 3, this is just a funny typo. If you, near the bottom, there's a motion that says, it reads, I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee agrees to the Hamilton Random Cutler Study Enrollment Certification. And
I'm sure we didn't motion it that way.
I think that's just a typo, and that should be the Hamilton Wenham Cutler Study.
I missed that.
So with everyone's permission, I might just go ahead and make a motion. I move that we approve these minutes with the substitution of the word Wenham for the word random in the motion.
Second.
Seconded by Amy. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? That is unanimous of the 6 members present, and the motion passes. Amy, can you just figure out how to make that happen?
Yes.
I'll take care of it.
Okay,
I'll take care of it.
You'll take it? Okay.
all right, thank you.
Good catch.
Yeah, I actually, it was quirky, because I was like, I gotta see what happened in the recording there, like, and I did listen to it. It was just nothing. I don't know how that
I think
happened.
I said that.
Okay. Next up, I believe Mr. Menegoni is gonna give us some information update about the high school handbook.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. First thing, I'm up here to talk about are a couple of updates to the student handbook. These are largely language driven from the state, so it's nothing that we're changing in terms of our own internal policies and procedures. It's just language that the state would like us to make sure is in the student handbook. The first change that you could see in the memo has to do with the discipline of students with disabilities. And this is coming out of our most recent tiered focused monitoring visit from the state, where they wanted us to make sure that we had specific language around the procedures that are used for discipline of students who may not yet have been found with a disability, but who could be suspected of having one, okay? And the place where we chose to put this very specific language was an appendix, because in the section where we had already talked about the discipline of students with disabilities, we had highlighted what our procedures are around discipline of students who may be suspected of a disability. They just wanted us to expand the language that the state is using everywhere. So that's really the first update. And again, it's just a language change. The second change to the handbook involves due process around suspension of students, suspension not related to drugs, weapons, assault on a faculty, or felony. Rather, this has to do with anything else that may happen in a school where you have to issue some sort of disciplinary consequence, and suspension is a consideration. The state law changed in November regarding what we have to do as a school.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
can I interrupt you for 1 second? Maybe I'm missing, we all have the first thing that you just talked about. I'm
Okay.
not sure that we have the second.
Yeah. Okay.
Weren't they all in the same package?
Yeah, there was one memo.
Yeah.
It's,
There's no memo, there's just the disciplinary update.
We have the first thing you just discussed, we have.
That's the 2-page exhibit. We don't
Okay.
have anything else.
okay. I just have a memo if you'd like me to bring it up to you, and somebody could take a look at it.
You want to project it?
Can you project it?
Sure.
I thought it was me.
Nope.
That's it.
I know, I was like, oh, there's more?
641 more.
Oh, gosh.
Can it be any bigger?
Yeah.
Better, okay.
Maybe even bigger still, but that's okay, all right.
Does that look like what you have regarding?
No,
Oh.
what we have is the text of the first change, which is the discipline with
Okay.
and we don't have the memo, and we don't have the second part.
Okay.
Um,
Interesting.
Oh, this-
Really, the second one really is a law change that we put into our student handbook. It's nothing, again, that we've changed ourselves, so it's something that we just have to have in there. It has to do with use of suspension as a disciplinary consequence, like I said, for things that are not related to drugs, weapons, assault on a faculty member, or felony. And really what you're supposed to do according to the way the law is written now, is considered other remedies before suspending a student. It could be restorative practices, community service. It could include exclusion from extracurricular events and things like that before keeping a kid out of school. And that would include both out-of-school suspension and in-school suspension. However, it's the case where a student's disciplinary infraction, and their continued stay in the building might be disruptive or even dangerous, the suspension would be allowed in that case. You could also suspend a student from school if the alternative remedies really just don't make sense for that particular situation. The good thing is that suspension isn't really anything we have to do at the high school. It's incredibly rare. We're a small school, and the kids, by and large, do really what's asked of them. So we don't get to that point with these students. So the updated student handbook should have been sent to you, I believe. If you didn't get it, I apologize. I can send that along. But all it has in it is a case where, or it just has the language from these students with disabilities in their discipline, and it shows it where it's in the appendix, and that's now Appendix J, and the change to the due process rights around suspension are now put into the place in the handbook where we talk about disciplinary procedures. It's not terribly exciting, but we felt it should at least be in the student handbook. In the one case a year, we have to pull it out when somebody does something kind of crazy. We want to make sure that that's in there.
So just making sure that I understand, the second change, the due process, is this italicized language?
Correct.
That is okay, that's
Correct.
the entirety of what the second
That's
part.
the
Yep.
entirety of
Okay.
the language that was given to us to
By the
put
state.
into the handbook. It's not necessarily the statute itself, the entire statute itself.
Okay. Okay, does anyone have questions? Anna?
Do we don't have to, to vote on this, right now?
No, I would, because it's a state law, I think somebody
Right, no,
already
but like,
voted
do
on
we,
this, yeah.
we don't have to perform some sort of performative, we adopt this?
No.
Okay. The only issue, Eric, I was gonna raise is this probably took place after we reviewed all the J section policies, that effective date. So we might wanna consult with Dorothy or check, we might have to change the underlying policy that this pertains to, which I was trying to go back in time and figure out when we really did J. I know it's adopted, it's not on our website yet, but maybe.
I actually feel, not to interrupt, but I actually feel like when we were discussing those disciplinary policies that Eric actually mentioned to us that this had changed. I feel like we had a conversation about that it might be required to go back and look at it.
We did.
Yeah.
And the reason we haven't made a move yet is because we're hearing that it's gonna change again.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
Okay.
this language was kind of slipped into a mental health change in the law that was done. It came out of the blue for most superintendents and principals. It was a surprise for all of us. MASS, MSAA, and other groups, I think even MASC is working to try to get them to take a better look at this, because it really handcuffs some school systems. As Brian said, we don't deal with this very often, but you want to have it available when you need it. But we hear it's going to change again. I just don't know how quickly that will happen. So.
And even if we hadn't done a local policy change, state law would always supersede it
Correct.
anyway, so
Correct.
it's a little bit immaterial, but, okay, it might be worth, it might be worth just double checking if there's anything that I guess I'm putting a pin in the future policy subcommittee. This might be something that somebody needs to look at.
You're not going to have another meeting?
Yeah, I'm not going to have another meeting on that. The only thing I'll say, which is kind of nice, is I do recall that members of the committee were concerned about the quickness to suspension. I feel like perhaps Dr. Carr especially raised a concern about, introducing more of this language. So it's sort of nice to see it codified, I guess, in that way. But
Yeah. They did, back in 2014, they kind of pumped the brakes on suspension a little bit by introducing more due process into that procedure. But you still could suspend a kid. Now it's just a little bit different, where you really need to consider alternative remedies, and they're, I think, very direct about it and very clear about what you're supposed to do in terms of documenting it. But it does sound like this indeed probably could change again. So we'll see where that goes.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you for that.
Okay.
Helpful. Okay. Next up is some information about the fitness room renovation. Is that also going to be you, Mr. Medigoni?
I believe so, unless there's anybody else here.
Looked like you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the fitness room at the high school. And I want to emphasize that it is a fitness room because it encompasses both strength equipment and cardiovascular equipment, so a lot of work is going on there during the school day. So you may be asking why this particular space and why now? Given the needs across the high school, why would we sort of step into this realm? Well, globally speaking, what I would say is that the gym refresh that did happen over the summer in terms of a completely refurbished floor and a brand new sound system, I think really made a huge change to our school and to our community as well, because the gym really is something that's used year-round, not only by high school kids, middle school kids, but also our community as well. And I think also that we will be able to say with a renovated fitness room that we've largely taken care of our indoor athletic facility pretty quickly. And I know the gym is relatively new compared to the rest of the high school, but 20-something years is too long for things to go by without really looking at not only its appearance but its functionality. Okay, and when we think about what's maybe driving families to consider other options for high school facilities and athletics are two of the first things that they always bring up. So I think it really makes sense to focus on these spaces right now, particularly when we've already taken a step in that direction in terms of the gymnasium space. So what I'd like to do is just take you through some details, an explanation of what this project really is about, and some more details as to why, okay? And 6 points I could raise: poor condition of the current space, some safety concerns related directly to the equipment itself. When you look at other schools' fitness facilities and strength and conditioning equipment, the number of students in our school who are accessing that space, a proper recovery and training space for our student athletes, and finally, some community use and those considerations. These are the whys I'd like to discuss quickly. So I did my best to take pictures. It's not my thing at all, as you may see, but I just wanted to highlight a few things, okay, in terms of appearance. We have a lot of mismatched strength equipment that's been accumulated over the years. I don't know where it came from, who brought it in, if it's any good or not, if it's functional. We have ceiling tile damage from roof leaks in multiple places. There are ceiling tiles missing. It's just not a good look. And you can see in the bottom right-hand corner some significant floor damage where the tiles have lifted up. Some of the rubber matting that's just been placed over those tiles has been moved to prevent any growth of mold or anything like that. So I don't think these pictures do it justice, really. I would invite any of you who would like to come down and take a look at the fitness space. I would gladly take you on a tour so that way you can see how it currently exists. Safety concerns. We have equipment that's really beyond repair, beyond its useful life. In fact, a lot of the equipment in there, the company no longer exists. So if we needed a replacement part, we're in a little bit of trouble. That also makes me think, how stable is some of this equipment in there? If we have an athlete or a student in there using some of this cabling equipment, is that cable going to snap? What's going to happen? We have broken weight equipment in there. You can see that that silver Olympic bar is actually just completely broken. What would happen if we had 200 pounds on that and a kid was using it and the other end snapped? Some unstable weights, believe it or not. We have a whole bevy of dumbbells in there that when you pick them up, you feel like they're going to fall apart. In fact, I was in there working out one day between basketball games, and Steve Sawyer, our track coach, was in there, and I picked up that very weight, and he said, "I don't think I would put that above my head."
It didn't make me feel real good about what I was doing, but that's really just the condition of a lot of the equipment in there. It's just not where it needs to be at all. When you take a look at fitness rooms at area high schools, and here I included North Reading, Pentucket, and Tewksbury, clearly what they have is a lot different than what we have. What they have, I think, is attractive to families, it's attractive to kids, it makes them want to be there, and it can really drive their improvement as athletes and as student athletes. North Reading and Pentucket came about as building projects were completed, so it's a pretty easy thing to do at that time. Tewksbury High School, interestingly enough, their strength and conditioning facility is off-site of the high school. It's actually built over concession stands, locker rooms, and ticketing booths at the stadium. But it's really kind of cool because they have those windows that you can see there that are overlooking the entire field. So student athletes, have that view, and it's a place that they want to be. And that's an important consideration, what it looks like and what it feels like to get them to want to go there. When thinking about student access, how many kids actually use that space in the course of a school year? Every single kid in high school has to take PE. That means every single kid is going to be accessing that fitness room. Not every single kid is going to be necessarily accessing a chemistry room during a given year. We have at least 175 unique student athletes using it before and after school. The football team is in there oftentimes before school. Hockey team will be in there afterwards. Soccer will be in there oftentimes on rainy days doing conditioning. There's all kinds of reasons why our student athletes are in there. So you're looking at over 620-something opportunities throughout the school year, both before, during, and after school. In a typical classroom, you might have 129 students going through it. So I think that this shows that the fitness room is a space that's definitely going to get used by a lot of different kids, really everybody and more. The one slide I kind of left out because I couldn't find a good picture of her was Hannah Measurement, our trainer. I did speak with her about the current space that we had, and she said it's really inadequate to do the work that she needs done. As kids return from concussion and have to go through that 5-day protocol, she doesn't have the equipment that she needs. Furthermore, when she is in there monitoring student athletes, the way the room is currently configured, there's really there's a cardio space which takes up most of the room, and then the strength stuff is towards the back. She can't monitor everybody in there at a given time because of the way the wall is configured currently. So our training staff, I think, needs a better space for our student athletes. And I think this is a really important consideration, is community use of the fitness room. Because our schools are community spaces. The community supports them through their tax dollars. And I think it would be helpful for us to think of them in terms of spaces that our community members can use. For example, reserving time for faculty to use the fitness space after school. Faculty would like that. They would be able to go down there. We would make sure the children stayed out of it, because sometimes it's not always the greatest thing when you're on the treadmill looking next to you and there's a kid who is in your English class. Maybe you like that kid a lot, but you might not want to see him at 2:30 on the treadmill. And I think that's a good way to build and emphasize the health and wellness of our faculty as well. Also, it would be nice to think about partnering with the Councils on Aging to provide access for our senior citizens, because I think we could open this up before school and during non-competition hours, perhaps, as a way to bring some of our senior citizens into our schools so they can see the work that we do in our schools, but also benefit from that and develop those relationships that I think are going to be really important. I would extend that to the field projects. As we expand our spaces and our footprint, we need to think about the fact, again, that these are community spaces, and we need to figure out ways to include as much of our community as possible. I have been working with a company really since November who designs these fitness type spaces all over the country. And really, our fitness room is probably about a half to a third of the size that you would want for nowadays standards. But this is what we have to work with, really. So based upon, what this company, has learned over the years in terms of how kids need to work out, what their equipment is like, and the space that we have, This is the layout that they're currently proposing. There's, we can still slide some things around here and there, but what this really lets us do is on the left-hand side, have largely a dedicated strength facility. Those things that look like the HW star on the floor, those are the power racks where kids are able to access the weights for squats and bench and deadlift and all that other kind of stuff. Behind that on the wall, you can see some of the cable machines that they have for pulling exercises. There's another pulling machine kind of on the wall where the racks are, and those two benches that are kind of sitting out in the middle, that is the dumbbell area where that kind of work can be done. What I really like about the equipment that we've been looking at, but as you look at this equipment from really any company that you would work with, it's highly branded. Every piece of equipment in there will come with Hamilton Wenham on it. It will say Generals. It will have the HW star on it, because I think that makes kids feel like they have a place where they belong, that they want to be, that they're part of our community. On the right-hand side, you can see that's really the cardio side of the fitness room. 2 treadmills, 2 ellipticals, 2 stair climbers, some of the bikes that we currently have, the spin bikes, and a couple of the other recumbent bikes. So this is the space that we have, and this is the proposed design for it. I've been speaking with the PE teachers, numerous coaches, shown them the pictures of this. They feel that it's obviously much better than what we currently have, because we just have stuff laying around that kids don't really want to access. It's not safe. There's not an easy workflow in there. And this is, I think, a way to continue the improvements of our athletic facilities. The one thing I would say about this particular rendering here, between the strength equipment and the cardio equipment, there currently is a wall there with a doorway. We would be removing that wall to allow, again, for one adult really to supervise the entire space, but also to make it appear as big as possible. The good thing about this space is that there are high ceilings in there, so that does make it feel a little bit bigger. But the idea here would be to really renovate the walls, the ceiling, to get the space totally ready for somebody to come in, lay down new flooring, and then bring the equipment in eventually, install that, and then we would be ready to go pretty quick. So I welcome any questions that you may have about this.
Okay, David?
You mentioned that some things had damaged the flooring tiles.
Yeah.
And that there was temporary cover. Do you know it? Sorry.
Sorry?
Do you know whether
David, can you
sorry.
talk into the mic?
Sorry, do you know whether those tiles are asbestos tiles or?
No, it's just the vinyl.
It's just
tiles,
vinyl,
yeah,
okay, good.
yeah.
And there's mold from
There's not
water
mold, but I
leakage?
think they've moved the mats around to prevent that. So that way, when it did leak and there was water puddling there, they pulled the mats out of the way to allow things to dry. So there's no evidence of mold in there, but the fact that you gotta, if it drips in there, you gotta start moving the flooring around. That's probably not what you wanna be doing.
No. Thank you.
Yeah, Jen?
Do you have an estimate on cost yet?
Yes, I do. So when you're looking at all of the equipment, strength equipment and cardio equipment, that's, I believe, about $120,000. And the renovation of the room, when you're looking at tearing the wall down, refinishing all the walls, because you're going to want to paint and refresh the space, the ceiling tile replacement, or even potentially taking out the drop ceiling, because some of these weight rooms actually just leave an open ceiling. You don't really need the tiles in there. Any electrical work that has to be done, especially for the cardio space, new lighting, we've budgeted about $40,000 for that. So that's how we
Said
get to the,
40?
yes,
So
40.
hundred
Yep,
and
sorry.
60,000 total?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
Pretty small.
Other? Vinny?
Does this give the trainer what they need to?
Can you talk into the mic?
Sorry. Does this rendering give the trainers what they need to respond to, like the concussion protocols
Correct.
that you mentioned?
Yeah, so Hannah's office is actually down in the lower left-hand corner. So she's able to come out of there. But the equipment that she really needs in terms of return to play protocol would be the cardio equipment, getting on the treadmills, getting on the ellipticals, getting on the Stairmasters, to do that kind of low-level work and monitoring their recovery from that. But for, kids also get twisted ankles, they hurt their knees, they hurt their shoulders and things like that, and she's able to help work with them and rehab them through those kinds of injuries as well with this kind of equipment. I mean, the nice thing about the way this is set up is there's just incredible organization of the space. Every single weight in there has a place to go. It's not going to be laying on the floor, so we're not worried about kids tripping over things, but if a coach or a trainer said, I need you to go to this station right now, they know exactly where to go to do the exercises, and it just makes for a better experience for everyone.
I just wanted to comment on, I noticed when you showed the other schools, one of the things that struck me right away, especially the Tewksbury, but I think all of them, it was that it really did represent pride in their school. You could see it, and I'm so pleased that you emphasize that about having, the general symbol and the Hamilton Wenham colors, and, I think that it jumped out to me, especially on that Tewksbury, I think it was a T slide. So I just want to say, I think that is important, and David Polito's not here to say it, so I'm saying it because he would be saying the importance of, I think it matters in the design, so.
I have a question. I'm thinking about the pieces of equipment that you said right now currently are dangerous. Do
Yeah.
we have plans to remove those or replace them?
Yeah, so we've
time.
inventoried everything that's in there right now, so we know what any sort of residual value may be, if any. A lot of that stuff, like I said, just isn't usable anymore because the companies are gone, so I don't know that anybody would take it. A lot of times the weights themselves, fire departments, police departments will take it. A lot of it will have value for scrap, quite honestly. Some of the cardio equipment that we currently have in there just isn't functioning, so it probably is at its age of disposal currently.
I was just more asking so that make sure that the equipment in there isn't dangerous, that we remove
Currently,
things that
yes,
don't work.
yes.
Oh, Julia.
My question is about the councils on aging. I think that's a fantastic idea. Are we thinking on weekends, or like when would the council on aging be able to use it when people are not using it?
So that's
Our students
what I
and
would want to
faculty.
figure out, what works
I think
for
that's
them.
a fabulous idea.
I mean, before school, perhaps.
Yeah.
We do have teams that are in there, like football, for example, is in there a few days a week.
Yeah.
But they're not in there 7 days a week. So could there be days before school, maybe from 7 to 7:30, where the Council on Aging is in there, with a small number of people. And there are times after school, or even in the evenings, where there's not a competition happening in the gym, or another team in there, where that could be accessed as well. The logistical things are, how do you supervise the space? You don't want to just open it up and have people
Right.
walking around. You want to make sure you have somebody who's in there who knows what they're doing, that can make sure that it's secured once everybody leaves. But it's a pretty typical thing to have in communities where they invest a lot of money in their athletic spaces. They want to make sure that it gets used, and so they figure out ways to make sure that the community can access it.
I think that's a great idea, and I would love to see it explored more deeply.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, Eric?
I'd like to speak to that a little bit. I think it's important for us as a school community, given the asks that we have on the table and the ones that are coming and the ones that are built into our budget, help the towns answer their question. One of the meetings I had with the joint chairs, immediately they talked about, what are we going to do for our seniors? Okay, all this money's going to the schools. What about our senior citizens? Not our senior students, but our senior citizens. And that's important, I think, for us to take charge of. I think it's a wise idea for us to start to reach out and say, okay, we're building pride in our community. We're creating spaces where kids want to be. Why can't seniors come and be part of it? And think about having a class. We have a class that's a fitness class, and kids learn how to build fitness routines. Imagine if then they invited the seniors in. Similar to the yoga class invites family members in to go through a yoga routine as their culminating project. So think about that as well here, where maybe once a week there's a fitness class who has a group of seniors bust in, they basically just work with them, and we're not talking about powerlifting, we're just talking about very
But
simple,
into the
straightforward
oldies.
things.
I used to do that in
To
seventh
make,
grade.
to make the connections. We already make connections with the senior centers with technology, where we send our kids out to help them with their technology. This is another aspect. I think the theater piece is another aspect that we include. We're gonna ask the towns to put $300,000 into our theater. And I think it's important to start to say, okay, how do we now connect the community to our schools? Because realistically, we are the flagship. We are the pride. We are the center of the pride. And I think it's part of building that. And Brian and his team is doing a lot of thinking around that as well. And I think it's important that people know that. I think that's, that's the way we can help the towns answer the question, rather than saying, wait, okay, we're gonna come up with something new. We already have it. We can figure out a way to integrate it, so.
How would this be funded? Would this be done with a bond, or?
No, we'll present that in a little bit later
Okay.
in tonight's agenda.
Tough.
Okay.
So much money.
All right, so you don't need anything from us at this moment, okay? All right.
Are there any erg machines? That's the only thing I'm not seeing under design.
Arnie, what, I'm sorry?
Rowing machines?
There are no rowing machines currently. I mean, the cardio side is kind of a rendering of what you could put in that space. But there's no reason why you couldn't move some of the bikes out, because they are pretty mobile.
I'm just
the-
thinking in terms of,
Yeah.
One, former college rower here, so
Yep.
I'm a little biased. But two, in terms of partnerships, that's a particular piece of equipment that's a lot more accessible for seniors or
Right.
people recovering from joint issues without the pounding of the stair or the bicycle. So
Yeah.
just a inclusive design,
Yep.
and they're super fun. Like,
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay, so next on our agenda is the progress flag. This was something you, Anna, had actually requested as a topic for a future meeting. And so I am going to actually, it is here, I'm going to actually turn it over to Anna. And I don't know if you want to start with a motion or if you want to give some of your thoughts. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Dana. I appreciate this time on the agenda. I think that, so my preface, and then I do have a motion prepared, I feel like we've actually, as a committee, talked a lot about some of these issues, so I don't actually imagine this as being a particularly, I don't think it's necessary to rehash everything that's been said over the last few years. But I had a very particular reason for bringing this forward. So I think I'll go ahead and make a motion, and then we can have a discussion to see if that's merited. So I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District fly the Progress Pride flag on all district flagpoles annually during the month of June.
Second.
Seconded by Julia Campbell. All right, do you want to say something before or do you want people to ask questions?
Well, I sort of have a rationale, and then,
Yep, go
Okay,
ahead.
so I had four sort of reasons for wanting to bring this forward. I was going to do it in different order, but I think I'll go in the beginning. So the first thing I just want to say is that, Pride flag raisings and Pride Month programming is established practice around the country and around the world. There's really no reason in my mind that we have to spend time on a yearly basis having this conversation. To me, it's established. I would actually say it's a cultural norm that in the month of June, it happens everywhere, from commercial stores to municipal gatherings. Sports teams have Pride nights, they have Pride jerseys. To me, this is completely normalized, and I don't think that having an annual discussion about it serves any purpose. And I actually think it causes active harm by having a public debate over whether or not we should be supportive of our LGBTQ students. I feel like we should be, as a standard practice, and I actually think in that way, this motion would help us save time and stress and agitation over time. Like, I don't actually think we need to talk about it anymore. So I wanted to put a motion forward, and I think it demonstrates, a clear sort of operational and legal foundation for moving us forward. So on those points, just as a reminder that it's an important and visible statement of support for our LGBTQ+ students and families from the highest governing body of the district. With increasing cultural and legal tax on LGBTQ youth and families across the country, I think it's important that the district leaders, including the school committee, stand firm in our support for a fully inclusive community. And in these ways, statements and symbols of inclusive representation really matter. It's also reflected of the goals of the initiatives of the Safe Schools Program for LGBTQ Students, which is a joint program of the Massachusetts Commission on LGBTQ Youth and DESE itself. So it's not like this is outside the norm of what's going on a state level. And then lastly, this is sort of something that has been much discussed. This would be a clear act of government speech, and therefore it's an appropriate legal mechanism to show support for our community, and it provides an operational foundation to simply move forward. I think we should just do this, and I don't think we should indulge in an annual conversation about whether or not supporting our queer families is a conversation. Like, it's not a conversation. I think we should just do this and move forward and take part in this very well-established practice. That was why I made the motion.
Thank you. Before we have debate, does anyone have any questions on the motion? Okay. Does anyone have any discussion? Okay, I do. None. So I have a couple of, to Anna's point, we have in fact debated this before, so I don't think it's going to be surprising what I'm going to say. I do have a little bit of concern. I have very much respect for the arguments that Anna made. I do understand the reason for making it annually. I do understand it. I don't actually agree that it helps, but I do hear you, and I agree that I don't think it's helpful to have a continuing annual debate. I do agree with that. I'll try to be brief. My feeling is that the work that this committee has done on DEI work and belonging work is critical, that those kinds of initiatives and policies that we put in place have allowed our schools to have and shown our dedication to have these symbols, to have specifically progress flags and other symbols of inclusivity in our schools. They belong there. They should continue to be there. I do agree that we have the right to do this kind of use this kind of government speech. We could do this. I personally do not think that it needs to come from us. I think it should come. These flags could be flown without the school committee directing the district, and it's the reason I'm not in support of us using that opportunity in government speech to direct the district to fly any flag. That's my statement. Anybody else have any other?
I have a question. So because we don't have a flag policy, is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So who, I guess what I'm saying is, who would be in charge of flying a flag? Just the schools or Eric?
You mean under the motion that Anna just stated?
No, without the motion Anna stated.
Oh, in my opinion,
Yes.
that it would be that the superintendent or even the principal could just, under the purview of the superintendent, the principal could even just say, I'm going to fly the flag.
Okay.
That's
Yep. Just trying to
my
clarify.
opinion. In the same way that currently, right now, like Mr. Menegoni could choose to fly a banner in the hallway, and that certainly the superintendent would be responsible for approving that, but it wouldn't need to come from us to say that that's going to happen. So. Are we ready to vote? Jen?
I understand where you're coming from, Dana, but equity and inclusion has been one of our goals from day one. And equity and inclusion has to be seen as coming from the top as well as from the layers underneath. So, I mean, I think that's why I'm supportive of us saying this Is it gonna change whether the principal or superintendent chooses to put a pride flag up? Probably not. But it is saying that the school committee supports equity and inclusion enough that we're willing to put our name on the policy.
Okay. Anna?
I think the only other thing that I would add is that, and I didn't put this in my initial comments, but I think there's some merit to it, in the face of sort of these gestating political challenges coming from different places. And we're seeing it, right? We're not seeing it in Massachusetts, but it is happening, right? There are districts and places across the country where terrible things are happening to the queer community. Horrific dehumanizing things across the country. So to Jen's point, part of the reason I think the exterior flagpoles are actually really important is that you don't have to be a student to see it. People driving by can see it. Visitors through our town can see it, and they can say outwardly, like, wow, that school district clearly believes in this. And I think as a value proposition, to Dana's point and Jen's point, we've already done all of the work inside the building, to the banners, to the DEIB committee. Like, we've done actually the really harder, and in some ways, that's kind of my point. We've already done the harder part of it. This is actually the easy part of it. Should be the completely normalized statement and gesture, but it is that kind of final gesture of saying publicly, the highest governing body has made a decision to make this an external point of representation. And I think in this day and age, representation is actually so very powerful for kids to see themselves, to see that, you know what, my district has my back. And I also think it provides a little bit of cover for if Mr. Menegoni or the superintendent or Ms. Schneider at Cutler wanted to do something, they know, you know what, the school committee also supports this. And I think it would actually free them up to feel more empowered, which as the governing body, I think is really important that the staff knows they're supported. So that's all I'll say.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? David, so you know that, I know you didn't get an opportunity to hear the discussion, but the motion on the table, and make sure that I'm saying this correctly, the motion on the table is to fly the progress flag on all district flagpoles annually during the month of June. Okay.
Good.
Are we ready to vote? Okay, all those in favor? That is 6 in favor. Those opposed? 1 opposed, and the motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, Dana, for the time on the agenda.
Thank you. Okay. Next up is, this is just I'd like to just get some procedures, some dates for the superintendent evaluation. So Eric, I'm hoping you're going to double check me on my dates here. Each year, our job is to do an evaluation, to complete an evaluation of the superintendent. A couple things that we need to just work through, and I'm going to ask you guys to just sort of work through it. So now that the time has passed, we know that there are two members that are up for election. The time has passed to file the paperwork, so that's Anna and myself. Are both up for re-election. Anna has not filed her paperwork, so her term will be ending. I did file my paperwork, so I am up for re-election. What we have done in the past, thank you.
I'm happy about that.
Thank you. What we've done in the past is to have people who are up for either ending their term or up for re-election to submit their evaluations prior to departure from the committee. I'm just putting out what we've done in the past because I'm going to actually ask you guys for a vote on procedures, what we want to do. So hypothetically, what we would say, because the election is on, just double checking myself, April 6th.
Yeah.
So it's April 6th is the election. So, in theory, and what we did last year was that the committee would say that both Anna and myself would need to submit our evaluation before that date. We can pick a date, but before that date. And then if someone were to be reelected, that person could go back and revise or add to the document, but, yeah, do you have thoughts on that?
I do have thoughts. And since I'm the
I'm not even done, but yes, go ahead. Go ahead. What are your thoughts?
So I guess I would say I didn't recall it being before the person left the committee. I thought it was just that they got a chance to submit an evaluation before
Yep.
Right.
before the actual evaluation happened, not necessarily before the election happened.
I'm sorry, say that again?
So let's just say, for argument's sake, Eric's evaluation was in June.
Yep.
The deadline to submit a report from any former school committee members would not have to have happened before they were not on the committee. They just have to submit it before June, but they could only opine on things that happened during their term.
So.
That's what I
Well,
remember.
that is what last time, there's no rule about what we're doing. I'm asking you, because last time we actually did say it was before they departed.
Did we?
I believe so.
Well, I would support, in the interest of my own personal sanity, that I be allowed to submit something before the date of the evaluation, but as a practical matter, like, if you ask me to write up a thorough, thoughtful, reasonable thing in the next month.
This is why it's an agenda item,
Yeah.
right? So
I think we should give ourselves until the date of the evaluation,
I do think,
not
though,
pre-election.
to Anna's point, I do, and I'm willing to hear other people's point of view, but I do think it would be important that, once the election occurs, that member is no longer a member of the committee, so it really wouldn't be appropriate for them to speak to something that occurs after.
After, 100%
You
agree.
look like you're
100%.
You're disagreeing, David.
But, it's not that I disagree with what you're saying. I just think the way that it's always been viewed, our elections really just sort of interfere with this process, just because of the
Yep.
timing. So the way it's always sort of been viewed is, sort of as Anna said, that we have allowed them to sort of pass the paperwork in after here, but they can only speak about their time while they're serving on the committee. So, if Anna leaves in April and Eric backs one of the trucks into the front door,
I can't write about that.
So that would get left off of her report while it's all on,
Yeah.
and the new member coming on would then only be able to write about Eric backing the truck into the Bucher door.
Right.
So there's that weird gray area.
I'm open to, what the will of the committee. I do think, though, well, that's a funny example. I do think it is true. Once a person's not on the committee, there might be things that they're no longer privy to what's going on.
And I made the joking example just to
Yeah.
sort of make it more clear, but it's actually far more difficult, especially for someone who tends to be as thorough as Anna, whereas if Eric had some open items that, into some of his planning that didn't finish until May, she might have to mark it down as, incomplete or not met yet, whereas the rest of us actually have, that extra time that we could say, all right, he has met the, and so, again, that's where it gets really tricky.
But I think, I think you have to take the outgoing half-done evaluation and the incoming half-done evaluation, both with a cup of salt, because, I would not be able to opine of things, and I actually think it would be unfair to Eric to be like, well, dude, you didn't finish all your goals before I left the committee, therefore you fail. Like, what a preposterous,
I mean,
that would
it makes it
never
really
happen.
difficult, and it stinks because you can't move anything else back because, unfortunately, you have
I
2
guess
months left in the
I look at that as like
school year.
a rational person could, like Eric, I'll just say it publicly, like, I don't feel like it would be fair of me to hold Eric accountable for work he has going to do later. Like,
Nobody graduated by the time I was there.
I know, seriously. So I mean, I would propose, if you're looking for guidance, Dana, I would propose that you and I both submit our statements before the date of the actual evaluation. We know that my comments will be limited to everything that happened up through April 6th, I guess.
Yep.
Yours may be able to continue much longer. I think that they will. So again, in the spirit of like saving you time and hassle,
Yep.
why make you do something now that's truly a time suck when you're going to have to do it again later?
Yep. Eric?
The only thing I would ask, and you're probably the only person that can answer this, maybe Dave too, but how long does it take you to compile everything, I think is an
That's
important piece
part
it.
of this, that's actually on my, that's
A
my,
long
that's my
time.
next part of this I want to actually do this all,
Well, if
all
you
the
only
dates
get,
in
but
this.
Dana,
It
if you
takes
only get a
couple of weeks.
partial from me, that cut your time in half right
Yeah,
there.
right there.
That was,
Right there.
right there.
No,
Remember though, she likes words.
I think, right, exactly. I think we did, well, I'll tell you, I have some potential dates. I want to do this all at once today. Like, I want to decide, if you guys are willing, what, what the departing or potentially departing members, what their role is. We also have a question about inviting departed members back, which we have done as past, in the past, we've invited them back to
Can we not use the word departed?
Oh, well,
Former?
former.
Departed, dearly departed.
I didn't mean it in that sense.
I know.
You had left.
I'll wear armbands.
I'm gonna wear my druid coat.
But we have in the past had former members come back for the discussion, but not for the vote. That's what we've done in the past. And then I also do want to talk about the dates that the evaluations are due, what date we actually have I have it already penciled in as June 8th as the evaluation meeting. And then I also want to talk about who's writing the compilation. So those are all the things I was hoping to quickly go through here. So let's start from the top. It sounds to me like we're saying that we would want members potentially non-return, members whose terms are up to have the same due date, but only if they don't return, to only write up until April 6th. Does that sound accurate?
Yep.
Right, do we think we need an individual motion on each one of these things? No? Okay. All right, I just want agreement, I guess. I have tentatively written down, well, we have said June 8th is the day that we would be having the meeting in which we are voting on the compilation. I think, Eric, you and I talked about, and if you look at June 8th, the meeting before that is May 18th. So that,
That's a long break.
that's right. I think last year we did 2 weeks. That's actually 3 weeks. But it is a school committee meeting that day, so does it make sense to have the evaluations due on the 18th? Or does the committee feel like it would be the 25th to still give 2 weeks for the compilation? Thoughts?
I would love more time, but it doesn't matter.
You'd like till the 25th, is what you're saying?
It doesn't, it's up to everyone, it doesn't. To me, I think another week won't matter.
No, I don't think it'll matter much in the compilation. I just think the extra week could help if life suddenly gets hectic. You have that 18th to remind you, all right, they're due next week. And
Are you talking about the person doing the compilation or the people writing the evaluations getting an extra week?
What's good for
I
one
had
is
one
bad for the other.
compilation go very quickly, and I had others go on for 4 months, so,
4 months?
yeah.
Don't bring that up.
We're not having that happen.
Let's hope not.
I'm open to what
There's 3 weeks.
you know,
There's 3
I mean,
weeks.
I guess maybe you want to skip ahead and decide who's doing this compilation?
I nominate Dana Awara to do the compilation.
So, to be clear,
Oh, I see the problem now. You
Oh,
clever.
I just want to say,
Aren't
I
you
would do it. I'm actually going to be in Australia from the, so I have a good excuse to not do it.
I'll do it. I can do it.
so, well, so, and if you're willing to do it, I'm willing to do it,
Yeah,
but
we
there is
can't
this
presume.
hypothetical
Can't
that
presume.
like,
But it's nice to give you a break, too.
yeah, so,
no, I don't mind doing it.
okay.
Wow.
Nice.
Good on Dan.
I'm theorizing.
I'm gonna
that this
be
one should go
extra
pretty
horrible.
smoothly.
Driving into anything.
No, just, yeah, we'll pull his keys and then.
So what are your thoughts are there other thoughts on other people that want to do it, or other people want other people to do it?
It's fine with me.
Okay. What are your thoughts? What'd you say?
I would love to have till the 25th because I'm coming right off final exams.
What do you, So, okay.
have the individual evaluations on the 25th, just because that week before is a good
And I was just gonna say, the
insane.
25th gives that extra time. If we finish at the 18th, feel free to send it my way. I'm happy to,
Yeah.
get the
Okay.
ball rolling. So.
Okay, so here's what I'm hearing. Okay, here's what I'm hearing. Non-returning members will only consider things that occur before April 6th, or up to April 6th. Members will submit their individual evaluations by midnight on May 25th. End of day, May 25th.
I like midnight.
What'd you say?
I like midnight
I
for
got
those of us
some.
who work.
I got some. I actually
59.
think you might have gotten like an hour extension.
I think I actually was in the 2 a.m. range on the day after, but it's not like you worked.
Just change your
The,
clock.
Ammonite owl.
the final,
Midnight Los Angeles.
the compilation will be completed with the final discussion and vote on June 8th. And I heard that David Polito would compile. That was a lot of information. Did everyone,
Got it all
On the
sounds good.
calendar.
D'accord.
all right, do we feel like we need a vote?
No.
Yeah? Okay.
Okay.
All right, David, thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
All right, and we will talk further as we get closer about getting those done. Thank you. All right.
I'd like for
Thank
future
you.
meeting, before then, probably just a quick meeting, or bring it up, a quick meeting of just how I plan on compiling it, so.
Do we get to have a conversation about the
Time on the
mean and the
agenda.
mode and the median again? Because I love to hear Dr. Carr talk about that.
Come on, let me do the stats.
Yeah, we can put that on as, I think, yeah. We think about when that would be, but maybe just before yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Awesome. Okay. Right, next up, Mr. Tracy, special education info.
All right, tonight I'm going to do a quick overview of our special ed out-of-district costs over 5 years. There's been a number of discussions recently about special ed, impact of special ed, et cetera. One of the bigger things is I think the surprise of the OSD increase of 14% for districts across the state. And that really played a big part in planning for many of our districts in the North Shore. As you know, we're members of the North Shore Roundtable. And the superintendent rep on that group with all the other superintendents in this North Shore area. We have been working on a subcommittee to address this with our local reps and senators because they actually didn't know about it. They were as surprised as we were, so we had met with Senator Tarr and several of our local politicians to talk about, where this came from, how it was decided. A lot of questions were left unanswered because they weren't sure. There's no, OSD does not have to go before anybody to create their increase, and their explanation is that they were trying to catch up with inflation, and they wanted to be able to give bonuses for hiring because those positions are extremely hard to hire in out-of-district placements. So that was their justification. We've pushed back. We have a meeting. We've had one meeting with local politicians and State House representatives back in January. We have another one scheduled for the end of March to discuss that and other things like some of the rule changes in Chapter 70, with the differences between federal and state regulations for special education and how that impacts schools. And I think it's important to note that they kind of are hearing us, I guess is the way to describe it. If you have paid attention to Governor Healy's budget the tentative budget that was put out, while there wasn't any money specifically for the OSD increase, we were requesting the total cost in a pothole fund for next year, and that number would have been $92 million to cover the increase across the entire state public school districts. So that didn't happen clearly, but they did put aside approximately $24 million into a special account. Generally, those types of accounts get divvied up over the larger schools, and smaller school districts and regionals don't often share in the bounty, if you will. So we're not so sure how that's going to work out, but there's still the Senate and the rep budgets to be done over the next month or so, and we'll kind of get a better idea once we get out the other side, if you will, with some agreement. So in our district, 1,715 students, including out-of-district students. In district, 354 special ed students that are in our schools every day. And there's another 47 that are currently out of district. That means in places outside of our school system. This could be something as basic as a collaborative program right next door in Beverly, or something as extreme as a full-time residential stay at a place in another state. Those are basically our two extremes. So we have something like a $10,000 placement versus a $250,000 a year placement, and everything in between. When you look at our out-of-district placement numbers, there really isn't a huge difference over time when you start to look at changes over time. Back in FY 2021, so that was basically COVID, we saw a drop. We saw almost a 5% drop in our totals, which includes private, out-of-state, collaborative, and transportation for those kids. That transportation number, as you noted in this FY24 budget presentation that Vinny did earlier in the year, over $1 million for 47 kids to be transported to various schools around the area for special ed out-of-district costs. As you look at our changes over time, collaboratives tend to stay fairly reasonable. They tend to be cheaper because we pay into collaboratives. We pay a membership to be a member of NEC, the Northeast Consortium over in Beverly. They take a good number of our kids, and we get a quote discount, if you will, from the current rate. In fact, I'm a member of that board of directors, and we just voted in 4% and a 7% increase, depending on which program kids are in, for groups in schools who are not members of the collaborative. So if a school is not a member of the collaborative, needs a placement for a child, and they have a placement available, it'll be 4 to 7% higher than what we pay, which is already discounted. So it's actually going to be a percentage higher than those numbers, but that's the increase we just voted for them for next year. So not 14%. So we're hoping that will happen in other places across the state, but there's no guarantees. So we have to really budget for all of it. When you start to look at tuition costs, we did have that drop during COVID, and that really impacted 21 and 22 because a lot of programs weren't open. There was no places to send kids. Kids were at home. And then it started to slowly ramp back up in this school year. Remember, the FY24 and F23 and 24 budgets, those are budgeted amounts. We don't have actual amounts because we're not at the end of the year. Those could be lower or higher by the time we reconcile the budget. Well, Vinny reconciles the budget for FY23. And then FY24, again, is a projection. We're basing it off what are the things we know at this time. One of the things we've seen is things like transportation have already changed just in this school year. Vinny will present a number a little later that's very different than what he presented in his earlier January presentation. So these numbers are really creeping up. You're seeing this year that
we saw a 14% jump, and I think mostly because kind of school normalized this year, and all these programs were open again, available to take kids. And then you see this 13% increase. And the first person I showed this to said, well, how come it isn't the 14% that you showed? Well, I'm hedging bets here, and I actually did cut back some of the requests. If you go back to our budget presentation for FY24, we took out almost $900,000 out of the initial request. Some of that is in transportation and our tuitions that we pay for out-of-district placement. So my thought is, and I've already been right in the consortium piece, the consortium piece will not be 14%, so we're saving money there. And we'll also see other changes and increases over time as well. So this really puts it in more of a graphic format, and you can see that rise. You can also see that transportation is growing quickly. I think that's one of the things to point out here. If you can really ignore FY 2021 really, because it was so limited. But then as you get into budget FY 23 and 24 next year, you're starting to see these things like transportation and collaboratives increase a little more than anything else over time. Generally, private tuitions have stayed, close to the same, $2.5 million or so. But you can see that large green jump in transportation costs, and I think we'll continue to see that, and it may push us into looking at other alternatives, and that really may mean opening up our own transportation business, to put it bluntly. When you start to look at spending $1 million a year to drive 40 kids to various places, then you start to weigh out the costs. I mean, this is really a business plan that has to be developed, but can we do it cheaper if we buy minivans or wheelchair vans and staff these? So those are things we're going to look at in the future, just so people are aware, but it's definitely worth also looking at some other alternatives. So programmatically, when you're looking at kids who go out of your district, you don't have a program specific in the district to house them or host them. Okay, so what can we do? What types of programs could we bring in? So we have programs for kids with IQs under 60, and they generally are learning life skills, and they're learning basic job skills. We don't have anything in-house that basically represents a home, so kids can learn how to cook, they can learn how to shower, they can learn how to fold their clothes and put them away. They can go with a job coach to a job and learn how to do simple jobs. But we could do that. What would it cost us to bring in a small modular and post it at the high school somewhere, and then start to give these kids opportunity to do this while also offering the service to all these other small schools around us that are doing the same thing we're doing? We don't have enough kids to have a program, so we send them out. So can we start to solve some of our own problems by looking uniquely at the changes that are occurring in our out-of-district expenses? Private school tuition has really stayed balanced. I know people are saying, oh, that's a huge jump. It's stayed fairly balanced when you look at it over time. We're only projecting, 225,000-ish over 5 years as a total increase from 20 to 24, what we budgeted in 24. Out-of-state tuition has gone down because generally it's one student, sometimes two, maybe three. Generally don't have a lot of kids in out-of-state tuitions. They just tend to be kids who need higher levels of services, sometimes, most of the time, 24/7 services. There's not often a lot of places for them to go. So Stacy Busick's office starts to call around and try to find locations for kids. And, we always start in state. And when we use up all of those options, we start to go out of state. And that's where, the costs start to increase dramatically. You may not have transportation costs because they live there 24/7, but you're also paying other things than the medical educational expenses. You're paying medical costs, you're paying housing costs, food. So another bone of contention of the superintendent's group to be able to say to the Department of Ed and to the state, we will gladly take on the educational expenses for these kids, but some of these other may be something that could be insurance-based. So those are, again, opportunities that superintendents are working on right now in the conversation scheduled for the end of March. Collaborative schools, and really we're trying to use our collaborative schools more. Stacy's really tried to keep kids there, and you're seeing that increase, but when you start to look at actuals versus totals, you're seeing another $250,000 over 5 years. Again, you'll see that 21, 22 dip. Certainly they had the same issues we had. You weren't getting kids in the building, so you weren't charging for kids, and now things have started to ramp up in 23 and 24. We intend to continue to use those services as they're available. So the big piece is, special ed costs keep going up. Special ed costs keep going up. This is getting crazy. This is out of hand. The reality is, none of us want to be in the position to put special ed versus regular education. I would never ask any of you to take a side, because they're all our kids. Every single one of those kids, whether they come to our schools or not, they live in our communities. We're responsible as a community, and these are the services that they need. And that's the best way to explain it. Like that, these are services our children need, and we're responsible as a community. And I think that's, that sometimes people get angry and they're saying, well, those costs keep going up, those costs keep going up. Well, there's some realities. We do get some money from the state. We get circuit breaker funds, which is a reimbursement program for the state, where some of the costs, and I won't say all of them, but they have been ramping up the percentages to close to 90% of costs for kids that are costing the district 4 times more than our foundation. So when you start to get into the circuit breaker, it is a gigantic math problem for every single kid. You can't claim them all, but there are certain thresholds when a cost of a child being out of district reaches a certain threshold, we can submit and get reimbursement for that. So over the years, we've been able to bring in about $1 million, $1.1 million, $1.2 million in circuit breaker costs that offset these tuition costs over time. There's also built into that, I have only tuitions on here, but there's also transportation. There are some transportation costs that are reimbursable through circuit breaker, but they need to exceed those thresholds, which are actually kind of high. So you don't really attribute it. You attribute it mostly to the tuitions and not mostly for transportation. So these are some of those changes over time that I think people forget when we talk about budgets and budgeting with our special ed services. Also not included in this are grants. We receive consistent grants over time from the state related to special ed that we can use for various programs both in and out, to the tune of about $400,000 approximately. It changes yearly. You might bump up a tiny bit each year, but those are fairly consistent grants that you basically will say to the state, yes, we still want to continue with that grant program, and they'll ask us to budget what it's for. So that also lowers some of our costs in special ed along the way, if you will. So I just want to take some time to show these numbers publicly and to really talk about the differences between the regular ed and special ed costs. They're when you start to break them out, it's really about what's called FAPE, free and appropriate public education, like where's the least restrictive environment these kids can go. And there are a number of kids in our district that we don't have the ability to house in our schools. We don't have either the facilities or the professional staff to be able to manage students in those realms. And I think it's important for the community to know that we do our best to meet those needs. It's tough in a small community. When you're in a small community and you're starting to take on some of these costs, it's a little bit different when you're a community the size of Beverly or Peabody or something like that, and you tend to get more offsets. But I just wanted to put those numbers out there so that people could get an idea of what's really happening with special ed. So I'll take any questions if you have them. I'll do my best.
Sure. What, you spoke to
Can you talk into the microphone?
Sorry, you spoke to Senator Tarr and possibly our rep about this topic.
Mm-hmm.
What do they say about the possibilities of getting an increase in support, either routinely or with earmarks or some other way to make up for the fact that it's somewhat of a matter of luck what percentage of children fall into this category in any one of these small towns?
Right. So the request we made a kind of a twofold request. We made the request about the 14% OSD increase, which initially
they weren't really aware of. They were as surprised as we were.
Yeah.
And the second thing we talked to them about was putting together an ad hoc committee specifically created of people maybe from the State House and some of our superintendents to re-examine the language differences between the federal and state laws related to special education, specifically funding over time, because there are some issues in there that tie our hands. You know, you're kind of trapped with some of these expenses. And I guess a $250,000 24/7 expense is hard to reconcile when you're saying, yes, we're covering the educational expenses, the free and appropriate education, but all these other things are also included in that cost. So we want to be able to have those conversations with them. So there were four representatives, representative aides, I guess is the way. Senator Tarr and, my apologies, I cannot remember the representative.
Rep. Kasner.
Beverly, no,
Paracella?
Paracella, thank you, was with us that day.
Jerry Paracella.
And it was a good conversation because we were able to kind of get that information out there, and it seems to be at least slightly reflected in the governor's first kind of pitch at the budget with the $24 million that's set aside for extraordinary costs. The one thing I think is important to note, if you read the Globe, it came up across the superintendent's students' fees as well. The billionaire's tax was supposed to be directed specifically for, you know, a good chunk of it for education. We're looking at 1% of it being used for education and very specifically used for early college, which is fascinating and also a little bit dumbfounding for our superintendents to be able to understand why that would suddenly happen when the promise was, you know, a good chunk of this money will come towards education. So it looks like currently 1%, that's the number we got yesterday. I don't know if that will change as the budget goes through the House and the Senate, but I think, you know, that's an important piece of the puzzle if we can get a bigger bite of that money to be able to come back to the communities, that will help to offset some costs.
Anyway, I like the idea of the ad hoc committee and getting closer to them, so they actually know there's a problem.
And we also, I think it's on March 3rd, it's either, whatever that Friday the 30th, I believe it is, because that's my daughter's birthday. So I think that's, we have a meeting with, it's called an annual legislative invite, where the superintendent's roundtable, in the North Shore Superintendent's Roundtable, which is about 25 superintendents, will invite reps and senators to a luncheon. It's being hosted at Whittier Vocational Technical High School this year, and we will be doing a presentation on all of this to them, specific to costs, laws, and things that we think need to be examined more closely. And certainly once we do that, I'll bring it back to this group so you can see what was presented. I think it's important for us to all be pushing in the same direction. And if we can get more money to offset the OSD increase, that's one step, you know. And it's hard when you say you're going to take a 14% increase for your FY24 budget, and then it'll go back to normal. Well, that 14% never goes away, and for us, that's about $378,000 that we never anticipated until we got a letter in the mail saying, by the way, folks, you know. And for other schools, it's bigger, depending on the size of the school. So those are important conversations, and we are having them. We meet weekly. I just met with the group yesterday to try to figure out different ways to get our information out there. So, and we'll continue to do that.
It's not a question, but I just want to really reiterate what you said, that these are our kids, and we have a responsibility to give them the free and appropriate education that they deserve. So I think I really appreciate this presentation. I think it sheds light on the actual, quandary, problem, situation, issue. Just, you know, you can put whatever name on it that you want, but it illuminates what's going on, but the underlying mission, the underlying real theme, and I appreciate that you said it, was that there are numbers on a spreadsheet, but these are our children. These are people that we're responsible for to provide that free and appropriate education. So I just appreciate that presentation, but also that you said that, and I stand behind you on that.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll bring more forward as soon as I get more from the superintendent's group as well.
Okay. Thank you. Are you going to go straight into the athletic facilities?
I will.
Okay.
So last time we met, we took a vote on the athletic facilities improvement project, and there have been some changes, mostly politically, that I think everybody here needs to be aware of, as well as the public. We've tried to continue to be as transparent as possible by putting all of the information out there for the project. So I'm going back to the presentation I did last meeting, but I'm going to show you some changes. I made them in the presentation so they would be reflected. As you know, we've talked about the approximate cost of $15 million. We're looking at offsets of 1.698 transfer into our stabilization fund from FY22 that's built into our budget. 500,000 from the Patton Homestead with a $250,000 match from Wenham. Those items are both on the warrants for their respective towns. And then of $1.2 million from the CPCs, 800,000 from Hamilton, 400,000 from Wenham. Those are also items that are on the warrants that need to be voted by the towns. If those votes pass, the school budget, the Patton Homestead, the match, and the CPC, there's 3.6 and some change, but I'm going to call it $3.7 million off the top. And as we'll continue to move forward with the fundraising group, whatever they can bring forward, their goal is $2 million, but they don't intend to stop there. If they got $2 million tomorrow, they would continue to fundraise. So I just wanted, that number is different. I only showed $800,000 where that green 1.2 million is, because we were not sure at that time when CPC had not met, so we couldn't count on the money yet. So they did vote for to match Hamilton with 400,000. So that's really just stuff now we just gotta wait to see how they get voted at town meeting. Along with that, there was some language changes. We do not have to vote on the change. We voted for exactly what we are asking for, the opportunity to borrow up to $15 million for that project. We've done that. In red, I put it in here specifically so you knew where it matched up. In red, after going back and forth with attorneys and the town manager, town administrator, select boards, FinComs. In fact, I met with Hamilton FinCom tonight just before this meeting. I met with the select and FinCom of Wenham on Tuesday night. Everybody's aware of this change. Everybody's happy with this change. There was some concern that if we were approved to borrow $15 million, what incentive would fundraisers have to continue to raise money? So a little bit of issue with that, but that's something that we've worked through and added this language, which amount shall be reduced to the extent of any grants, gifts received by the district on account of this project. So anything that we receive as a grant or a gift, everybody's agreed that it's going to come off the top. And I think if that's what makes people comfortable, that's fine. I do want to reiterate the fact that the people on the fundraising group have been at this longer than me or anybody else that's sitting here today, I think. At least 10 or 12 years. They are not walking away now. I've met with them several times to say, I need you to make sure you guys are still on board, because if not, the towns are nervous, and rightfully so, because, oh, you got the $15 million, you don't need any more money. They are people who live in the communities, they're taxpayers, they also want to reduce the cost to them, so, and they're dedicated to this. They really want to build a great project for the community, another pride factor in the community. So I think this was an easy switch to make people comfortable, but I just wanted everybody to know that that's what it'll say in the warrant article at town meeting, okay? So there'll be a number of things at town meeting that will be voted. The school budget, which will include that transfer to stabilization. the Patton Homestead, the Patton Homestead match in Wenham. So the Patton Homestead will be on Hamilton's. The Patton Homestead match of $250,000 will be in Wenham. The CPC funding in Hamilton of $800,000. The CPC funding in Wenham of $400,000. And then at any point after that, it doesn't have to get voted at town meeting, whatever the donations are that come in that are raised by the 501c3, the HWAFIC group, whatever they can come up with. And one thing I reminded the FinComs and Select Board of is that this project, we don't put a shovel in the ground until next March. So we still have a full year to continue to find other opportunities to raise funds to offset this cost. And you know, that can be continued fundraising, that could be another grant that might pop up or another opportunity. So I just wanted everybody to be clear what's been going on behind the scenes, kind of politically, if you will. And I think everybody's okay with the changes and comfortable, and they seem comfortable moving forward, all the groups so far. Questions?
I suppose one is that, you know, the way inflation has affected construction, is the 15 million still adequate?
Currently, we believe it is. We've met with the school building committee in February, and we have another meeting next Tuesday. We believe it is because of we have contingencies built in. We have a 20% contingency built in for that reason. And that was actually a conversation I just had with the Hamilton FinCom this evening, when they said, well, why are you trying to build this all at once? You know, why don't you phase it out? Well, if we phase it out, it's going to cost you $20 million, basically. We're trying to get this done and not see it grow anymore financially. So we believe we can keep it within that threshold. And you've heard it here. I've said it on every board meeting I've been on. I don't intend to go back to the towns and ask for $1 million or $2 million or $3 million more. This is where we're at. Somehow we'll make something happen. If we can't do the whole project, we'll scale it down where we need to. So I just think that's important for people to know. I don't think it's appropriate for us to go back to the communities and say, oh, we need $1 million more. I think it's, you know, if we do, we may be able to get it through fundraising, but I would never go any other route.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Right,
Vinny, I think you're up.
Point of order, do you want to vote?
We don't need a vote.
We voted on it. We don't, he
Oh,
said
we don't have to
didn't
vote
need
again?
No.
Okay,
It says vote, but yeah.
it does say vote.
No, I left it the same as the previous, I left everything the same as the previous meeting, just so it wouldn't confuse people. We don't need to vote. We talked to council. Council said we made the vote that we need to. And the reality of the warrant is that the towns can adjust the articles any way they feel fit, which I think everybody's come to a reasonable conclusion that this is a good way to go forward. So we do not need to vote. We've made our vote to acquire the $15 million.
Okay. Are you ready?
Exactly on time.
Thanks.
I know, I was impressed with you.
Dana does run a tight meeting. It's good.
That clock is a little slow.
Okay, so tonight I am here to give you an update on our FY23 year-end forecast. This presentation does represent our Q2 forecast. However, I just want to note that the data I ran from this is through January 31st. So if you look at Exhibit 2, the account detail, the year-to-date actuals and encumbrance columns, those numbers are actually through January 31st. As those of you know, I was on paternity leave till the second week in January. I came back and we were knees deep in the budget cycle, and then after that I was playing catch up. So when I finally got to run the data, it was actually effective as of January 31st. So just as an overview, because it was as of January 31st, technically 58% of the fiscal year has passed, while 95 of 180 school days have passed, or roughly 53%. So as we go through our forecast, as you may have heard me mention in the first quarter, every quarter forecast gets more and more detailed. So the first quarter, we did not perform a line-by-line analysis. It was more a big overview of what we knew at the time. For the second quarter, we incorporate a line-by-line analysis of all our payroll accounts and not a line-by-line analysis on our non-payroll accounts. And then on Q3, we incorporate both. So as we move on through the year, it gets more and more detailed. So what are the major budget realities facing us for quarter two? Just like in quarter one, we had prepaid. We had used our FY22 funds to prepay FY23 out-of-district tuitions in the amount of $1.2 million. On top of that, Student Services is projecting a year-end forecast for out-of-district tuitions to be a favorable balance of approximately $200,000. To note, this is a change from Q1. It represents a reduction of approximately $147,000. This is due to new students projecting to be out of district before the year ends. On top of that, we are scheduled to receive an additional $272,000 in circuit breaker offsets that will go to fund out-of-district tuitions. So just if you add those two line items alone, we're looking at a favorable balance for out-of-district tuitions at year end of approximately $472,000. On top of that, this is another year riddled with vacant positions. When the pandemic hit, we struggled to keep people in-house. It was a revolving door, especially with our TA staff. As the pandemic has subsided, it's gotten a little better, but it still isn't perfect. If you were to look at our forecast at this time last year, I believe we were around the $3 million mark. As you'll see in a little bit, we're now at the $2 million. So we're going in the right direction, but we still have a lot of vacant positions, which is where a lot of this money comes from. With those vacant positions also comes reduced health insurance costs. For every one of those vacant positions, we carry nearly $26,000 in health insurance costs. So if those positions are vacant, we're not funding their health insurance. In addition, when somebody leaves the district, those health insurance costs end until a new person comes in. So for that window where nobody's here, we're saving on our health insurance costs every day that somebody's not employed. In addition, as you saw me mention in quarter one, we do have our favorable budget for transportation in regards to our general transportation, but as you'll see in a moment, it's the opposite effect for our out-of-district transportation. So just to dive in, and then I'm going to go through it in much more detail. Right now, we're forecasting that at year end, we are going to have a balance of $2,215,000. You see it here in DAC form, and again, the same chart in DESI form. So right now, I'm going to go through school by school or major program area, and then by DESI category. So the way these slides are set up is we have every DAC broken out, and then within every DAC, we have what balances or what deficits are left over in each DESI category. I'm not going to hit every single topic on these slides, but like any presentation, if I skip over one and you think it's important or you have a question, please ask. Don't be afraid to interrupt in the middle. I'll answer whatever questions you want. Some things are low numbers but might have high importance, so I'll still talk about them while others do not. But again, please don't hesitate to stop and ask. So just to dive right into it, at the Bucher Elementary School, we're anticipating a balance left over of approximately $93,000. This is derived from many different areas. Again, just to highlight it, in our instructional leadership DESI category within the Bucher DAC, we are anticipating a balance of approximately $7,700. This is mainly due to one staff member turnover during the year. There was a retirement at the end of July, and we didn't bring on the new employee until later in September, and that employee came in at a cheaper salary. So not only did we have savings from their salary, we also had savings from days where there was a vacancy. In terms of the teacher DESI category, we are anticipating a balance of approximately $57,000. This again comes from a retirement. Usually in the budget process, we're notified of retirements in December. At the Bucher Elementary School, we had a retirement that didn't give us notification until June, so that was not built into our 23 budget. Just from this one retirement alone, we're seeing savings of approximately $40,000. On top of that, we had unpaid medical leave during the year. This individual went out, I believe, at the beginning of the year, and during the year, they were on an unpaid status. So during that time, we do bring in a substitute to cover, but that substitute is charged off to the substitute accounts, not the teacher accounts. So that's why you see here that there's savings of approximately $21,000 from this one unpaid leave. In addition to that, which you'll see all over this presentation, is more staff turnover of approximately $9,000 in the teachers DESI category. In addition, as you saw in the 24 budget presentation, with the new teachers collective bargaining agreement, we've changed senior status into longevity. So because of that, we see savings and we see deficits throughout the budget process, because senior status wasn't guaranteed, whereas longevity is guaranteed. So during the 23 budget process, we're estimating what our senior status payment would be. So when you look at this presentation next year, it'll be much more accurate on longevity, because we know exactly who's getting it, because we know how many years they've been here. But we wouldn't have known that with senior status. We do have a little bit left over for our salary scale advancement. Again, you'll see this throughout the presentation. These are teachers who submitted to move along the salary schedule at the prior school year, so we built that into the budget. But come FY23, they didn't meet the qualifications to move, so there's a residual balance left over because they didn't hit that mark to get paid the extra salary. In addition, and I kept it on here, there is what I call reverse staff turnover. So an employee or a teacher left the district, and the person we brought in actually cost more. The reason I broke this out is because I wanted to show that you really can't budget for staff turnover during the year. You'll see in here that most of the savings is from turnover, from somebody we're bringing in that gets paid less. We try to incorporate this in the budget, but the reason we don't incorporate it fully is because it can go the opposite way. It can happen, and just one staff member that we brought in actually cost us $23,000 more. So you really don't want to work it into your budget when building your budget. In terms of other teaching services, we're seeing a balance of roughly $14,000. The main area this comes from is a grant that we applied for. We received it, and we were able to put a TA salary onto that grant, saving us roughly $8,000. Just skipping along to instructional materials. This is the only time I'm gonna hit on instructional materials because it's the same methodology throughout the whole presentation. For instructional materials throughout the 5 schools, there's roughly $600,000 in instructional materials expenses. For our forecast, we go on the side of caution. So we assume that they're gonna spend all their money that they have allotted to them for their supplies. For any accounts that are already in the negative, we assume they're gonna end in the negative. So if you were to look at Bucher School right now, just for their instructional materials accounts, they probably have about $40,000 left over, and out of those accounts, there's probably 1 or 2 that add up to negative 167. So all the accounts that have money, I'm assuming they're gonna go to 0, but the negatives are gonna remain. That is very conservative. I think by the end of the year, we're gonna have a good balance left over in instructional materials. But for right now, to make sure that I cover whatever the principals are gonna spend, I go on the conservative side and assume they're gonna spend all of it. Does that make sense? So just continuing with Bucher, for their pupil services, again, we had another salary scale reverse advancement where the employee did not meet the qualifications to move, saving us roughly $7,000. For operations and maintenance, we're seeing a leftover balance of approximately $5,200, and this is mainly due to staff turnover at the Bucher custodian level. Moving on to the Cutler Elementary School, we're anticipating a residual balance of approximately $111,000. This is mainly derived from 2 areas, our teachers DESI category and our other teaching services DESI category. For the teachers, we're estimating a balance of just under $24,000. The main reasons for that is approximately $45,000 left over from staff turnover and another $11,000 left over from unpaid leaves. To offset some of that, as some of you probably recall from our FY24 budget presentations, we traded in 3 TAs for 1 teacher. The money doesn't follow them, so when you look at the DESI category, it's gonna show that the teacher's DESI category is being reduced by $46,000 due to that additional teacher in that area. But if you look over to the other teaching services, this is the other side of the trade-in. So we actually saved $73,000 from trading in 3 TAs. So when you net those 2 together, we did save roughly just under $30,000, but they're spread out between 2 DESI categories. So one's gonna be a negative and one's gonna be a positive. In addition, on our other teaching services, we had a lot of turnover. This relates to our TA staff. And in addition to the turnover, we have unpaid days and we have vacancies. When you net all those together, it still represents a leftover balance of just under $12,000. Continuing with Cutler, it's really just operations and maintenance that's left, and it's the same thing. We had another turnover at the Cutler Elementary School related to the custodian staff, so it results in savings of just over $8,000. Moving on to the Winthrop Elementary School, we're anticipating a balance of approximately $203,000, just like you see in the last 2 elementary schools and just like you'll see at the middle school and high school. Much of it comes from our teachers and our other teaching services. Here it's obviously more our other teaching services. But in terms of our teachers, we are anticipating that we will end in a deficit for the Winthrop Elementary School of just under $10,000. The main contributing factors here is the reduction of the pre-K classroom. This is the same thing you saw in our FY24 budget cycle. Normally, we have either 2 or 3 pre-K classrooms. For our 23 budget, we built in 3 pre-K classrooms, but we only needed 2. So you have the leftover teacher salaries of approximately $63,000 because we didn't hire that teacher. But if you look a little further down, the pre-K offset reduction, because we're not collecting that revenue, we're also realizing a lower revenue intake. So that offsets some of that salary salary savings that we saw. In addition, for the teachers DAC, we also have the same areas, staff turnover and unpaid leaves. And again, just like we saw at the Cutler School, we traded in 3 TAs for 1 teacher. So again, you're gonna see the negative on the teachers DESI category and the positive on the other teaching services. For other teaching services at Winthrop, that's really where most of the balance is coming from, where we're anticipating a $202,000 balance at the end of the year. Again, it's $85,000 for the trade-in for a 1.0 moderate special education teacher for 3 TAs. In addition, we have a vacant .7 FTE SLP teaching position. This position has been very difficult to hire. I believe this is the 2nd year in a row that this position has been vacant, and we anticipate that it's going to be vacant for the remainder of the year. This position, instead of it being an employee, has been contracted out. So when I get to the special ed DAC, you'll see that they're in a deficit because now we're contracting it out instead of having it as an in-house employee. In addition, we had some leftover grant funds from FY22 that we were able to rewrite and work in, I believe, 2 TA salaries, therefore saving us an additional $42,000. So instead of taxpayer money funding these 2 positions, we were able to put it to a grant and thus save taxpayer funds. In addition, we're seeing a balance of approximately $17,000 because of 2 TA positions that were hired where the individuals did not meet the qualifications to be paid on the TA salary schedule. Therefore, they're being filled with a substitute at a much cheaper rate. Between these 2 positions, again, we're saving roughly $17,000. Same thing again with the staff turnover. The Merrimack Fellow, when we build our budget, we include TA that costs roughly $25,000 with benefits. But when the year actually comes, we try to go out and team up with colleges and bring in fellows. That means that the district pays a portion of the student's tuition instead of paying a TA. So for Merrimack, the cost is $19,000 for the tuition, whereas we budgeted roughly $25,000 for a TA, thus saving us roughly $6,000 for this one instance. We also had some late hires, meaning instead of them joining us on August 28th, they didn't join us until later in the year, resulting in savings of about another $5,000. Offsetting some of this, however, was the need for an additional TA at the Winthrop. So when we built our 23 budget, we actually transferred a TA from Winthrop to the high school. But when FY23 actually came, we saw that we didn't need that position at the high school and we still needed it at Winthrop. But again, the money doesn't follow them. It stays where we originally budgeted for. That's why here you'll see a negative, but when you come to the high school, you're going to see a positive on their end. Just continuing with Winthrop, another area is our pupil services, where we currently have a vacant lunch monitor position, saving us approximately $5,000. Just like we saw at all the other 2 elementary schools, at all 3 elementary schools, we had turnover in our custodian position. So again, we have a residual balance due to the cheaper stepping grade of the new custodian. Moving on to the Miles River Middle School, we're showing a balance of approximately $174,000. Again, this comes from our teachers and our other teaching service categories. For our teachers, we're seeing a leftover balance of approximately $75,000. This comes, for those of you who were on the committee last year, this comes from the new investment that we requested for FY23 of a 1.0 world language teacher to help secure the world language program. When FY23 started, we actually didn't need the whole position. We only needed 0.4 of it, so the residual 0.6, we're realizing savings of approximately $46,000. Again, we have staff turnover of approximately $32,000. And here we see $20,000 for unused teaching 6 class stipends. So per the teachers agreement, every teacher teaches 5 classes. If we have them teach 1 more class, they receive an additional stipend. So we budget that at both the middle school and high school level. Here, we didn't need anyone at the middle school to teach a 6th class, but at the high school, we actually needed more than what we budgeted for, so you'll see the opposite effect at the high school. We actually had a retirement loss at the middle school. We had 2 late retirements. One of them cost us roughly $15,000, so the new employee that we brought in was actually at a higher step and scale than the employee left. The other retirement, it was a late notice and a late retirement. So they didn't retire at the end of FY22. They retired, I believe, November 1st, which becomes very difficult for students to switch from a teacher that they only had for 1 month. So the decision was made to actually hire a staff member day 1. So we actually had 2 people running concurrently, which resulted in a cost of roughly $21,000 to help the transition between teachers. Moving on, for other other teaching services, we have a balance of roughly $75,000. We actually reduced a moderate special education teacher at the middle school, TA at the middle school, saving us just under $25,000. Again, we had staff turnover, and again, we had leftover FY22 grant funds that we were able to file an amendment for and write in additional TAs, saving taxpayers roughly $19,000 and using grant funds instead. Another big one is our guidance, counseling, and testing. So this relates to, again, the new investment of a school counselor that we requested as part of our FY23 budget. That member that filled that role was actually an internal transfer. So when they moved over, that actually cost us $7,000 more than what we anticipated, but the person that backfilled their old position saved us $43,000. So both those two relate to the same person transferring from one position to another that ultimately in the end did save us $35,000. Here I wanted to point out the operations and maintenance, where we are actually going to end in a deficit of about $65,000. You'll see this again at the high school, and the reason for this is their collective bargaining agreement wasn't actually signed until after the year started, and they received a COLA bigger than what we budgeted for. The reason you didn't see that at the 3 elementary schools was because we also had staff turnover and vacancies, so that created a budget balance. Whereas in the middle school and the high school, it was the same staff members there, and therefore, because we didn't budget for that increased COLA, you're going to see that that ends in a negative. For the high school, we're anticipating a balance of approximately $376,000. There's a couple big areas on this one. For our instructional leadership, we did have turnover at the principal level. This resulted in savings of just under $20,000, as well as the NEASC accreditation occurred the fiscal year before that, but it was still in our 23 budget. In terms of the teacher's DESE category, we're anticipating a balance of $245,000. The biggest offset here relates to our school choice in. These are students that reside in other towns that are choosing to come to Hamilton Wenham for their education. This balance, or this additional $101,000, about $85,000 of it is the special ed increment. So even though we get roughly $5,000 for every student coming in, if they are a special ed students that receiving additional services, we can seek reimbursement from the sending district to Hamilton Wenham. That accounted for about $85,000. And like I mentioned in our budget cycle, we don't build that into our budget because it's so unpredictable. Students change every year, so you don't know which ones are going to come the following year. In addition, their IEPs change, their services change, the reimbursement rate from the state for each different IEP category changes. So we don't work that into the budget. However, when it comes in, we use it as an offset. It still comes as a revenue source, and it goes right down and falls down to our E&D at the end of the year. The next major item, I'm just going to thank Kirsten Losey again. She took on the responsibility of being the middle school assistant principal this year, and also took on the duties of the fine arts curriculum leader. So our curriculum leaders, they are 1.0 positions. However, they only teach for 0.6 of it, and the other 0.4, they're a curriculum leader. So because she took on that additional responsibility, we saved 0.4 of that FTE. And in addition to that, the member we brought in was a retired teacher that gets paid lower on the salary scale. So those two things together from that one position alone saved us $67,000, which is a substantial amount from one position that really is just a 0.4. In addition, we had 2 unpaid leaves that saved us roughly $40,000, as well as additional staff turnover. Here is where you also see the other side of the teaching 6th class, because we needed more teachers up there to teach the 6th class, so we are in a deficit in that area. For other teaching services, we are seeing a balance of roughly $69,000. Again, this has to do with employees that we hired that did not meet the qualifications to be paid on the TA salary schedule. Therefore, we were paying them as a daily substitute that got charged off to a different account. In addition, at the high school, this is where you see the other half of the Winthrop moderate special education TA that we thought was going to transfer up to the high school, but ended up staying at the Winthrop. So the Winthrop had the negative, the high school has the positive. Continuing on with the high school, we have our guidance, counseling, and testing. We're anticipating a balance of roughly $26,000. Again, we have our unpaid leaves and unpaid additional days, as well as a reverse staff turnover that costs us roughly $7,300. In addition, we have our pupil services DESI category coming in at roughly just under $13,000. Which again is all staff turnover and vacant days. And just to point it out again, we have our operation maintenance coming in at a negative because of the collective bargaining agreement. So that does it for the 5 schools. Moving on to kind of the district-wide areas, we have our athletics program, which I am just going to be honest, this is the first year we're doing the tiered approach. So it is very difficult to me to predict where we're going to end at the end of the year. So in terms of the forecast, I am just putting them pretty much on budget. It's really going to take 2 to 3 years of consistent data before we can actually accurately predict where we're going to end the year with this. I'm really not going to know what the athletics is going to end in until probably June 30th. So right now, again, to be conservative, I put it at budget. Did you have a question? Sorry. Nope. Okay. Central office, we're seeing a balance of roughly $413,000. This stretches across all DESI categories. Just starting with the top, our administration, we're seeing roughly $34,000. 32 of it comes from the school committee contingency funds and our lawyer costs. We're not in a negotiation year, so our lawyer costs are much lower this year, but we don't change our budget year to year for that. In addition, we're giving back the $25,000 in our administrative salary contingency. It's now nearly February, and we know where that was supposed to go, so we can turn it all back at this point. We also saved $18,000 from our vacant accountant position. Starting July, we didn't have an accountant. I think they didn't come back on board until November, so I was kind of pulling double duty, filling in for the accountant, and that saved us roughly $18,000. Some of these savings are being offset by new and enhanced district-wide technology, adding things like Panorama, Vector, moving Budget Sense to the cloud, and updating our website, all things to kind of help with efficiency throughout the year. For instructional leadership, we're seeing a balance of roughly $26,000. This mainly comes from additional FY23 grant funds that we received, as well as unused stipends. So in terms of the unused stipends, I believe we budget 26 new teacher mentors. We didn't have 26 new teachers that needed mentors this year, so we didn't use those stipends. As well as, I believe, 3 other stipends that we eliminated and actually worked those duties into somebody's normal 9 to 5 job. So we saved on stipends there. For teachers, we're seeing a balance of roughly $48,000, and this comes from one position alone. Our ELL teacher was, I believe, hired for the first day, but resigned after day 5, and it stayed vacant, I believe, all the way until maybe mid-January. Yeah, we finally hired an ELL teacher, so because of that, 5-month period of nobody there, we saved roughly $47,000. For our other teaching services, we're coming in at just about $76,000. $40,000 of this we're anticipating is leftover substitute salaries. As some of you remember, we did raise our substitute salary for this fiscal year from $100 to $110 per day, but it is still very difficult to keep these subs in. The districts around us are still paying more than we are. So we have a very low sub pool. Therefore, we're kind of pooling classes together sometimes with one sub covering it, therefore having a balance left over at the end of the year. In addition to that, we have about $36,000 left over from our ELL tutor positions. In our current 23 budget, we have 2 tutors. One has been vacant the entire year. We have not been able to fill it, and we don't anticipate we're going to be able to before the year ends. In addition, we also built in an ELL tutor into our ESSER 3 grant. So we're seeing savings not only from one of the vacancies, but also from one of the grants picking up the other salary. In terms of professional development, we're estimating a balance of approximately $45,000. A big chunk of this comes from substitutes again. So if you were to look at this line pre-pandemic, we were probably averaging anywhere between $20,000 and $30,000 a year for substitutes for professional development. So that's a teacher or a TA that's requesting to attend a professional development seminar or class outside the district and requires a substitute to cover their classroom while they're gone. Since the pandemic hit, we've probably spent $1,000 over 3 fiscal years on this. Nobody is going out. Nobody's really offering PD. This is something we'll definitely keep an eye on the next couple budget cycles, just to see if this is kind of something that's permanent or whether it's going to kind of go back to the normal levels pre-pandemic. In addition, we had more FY23 grant funds that we were able to use instead of taxpayer dollars. Continuing with central office, we have our pupil services, which is where a big balance is coming from, of approximately $162,000. You saw me present this in the first quarter presentation, where a big chunk of it is our transportation budget, where we're seeing a budget balance of roughly $116,000. In addition, we have the cafeteria bailout that's not needed. So this relates again to kind of pre-pandemic. Before the pandemic hit, the cafeteria ran a deficit every single year. It went somewhere between, I believe, 20 at its lowest to, I believe, almost 100,000 at its highest. Since the pandemic hit, we now have free lunch for everyone, and we've now been developing positive balances at the end of the year. Therefore, we don't need the cafeteria bailout funds at this time. In addition, we worked the student transportation coordinator stipend into somebody's daily responsibility.
Point of information, is she sitting in the room?
Yes, she's sitting in the room. That's why I kept looking at her. Thank you. In addition, our SRO did come in at a little bit higher cost than what we had budgeted for. Next up is our tuitions, where we're seeing a balance of approximately $23,000. And for central office tuitions, this is our school choice out program. So that's Hamilton Wenham residents, students that for whatever reason decided not to attend our schools and went and attended Beverly or Essex or Ipswich. We were kind of on budget with this, but what happened is 2 fiscal years ago, I discovered an error in our report that was submitted to the state. So there is a household, not to get too detailed, but there's a household that splits the line between Hamilton and Essex. In that district, their mailbox is in Essex, but their house is in, I'm sorry, their mailbox is in Hamilton, but their house is in Essex. So I fought that placement, and DESE decided that we were correct, and that student actually belonged to the town of Essex and not Hamilton. It saved us, I believe, $10,000 in FY21 and $5,000 in FY22, which got reimbursed in 23. So it saved us roughly $15,000, and the other $5,000 is just an over budget. Yeah, okay, I'm still going. So just moving on, the maintenance DAC is made up of one DESE category, operations and maintenance. Here we're seeing a balance of $58,000. This relates to the new investment we asked for a new maintenance staff member that was vacant for most of the year. We finally filled it for about 2 months, and then that individual then got hired as a custodian at the Cutler Elementary School, so now it's vacant again. We don't anticipate we're going to fill it by the end of the year, so from this one position, we have roughly $48,000 left over. Moving on to benefits and fixed charges, where we're seeing a balance of roughly $485,000. Most of this does come from our health insurance premiums as well as lower enrollment. That is also derived from what I said before, our vacant positions and all of our turnovers. So those days that we didn't have the employee here saves, I believe, $150 per day per occurrence on each individual that's not here. On top of that, it's been a great year for our unemployment costs. There really hasn't been any. We haven't laid anyone off, or we haven't fired anyone, so our unemployment costs are much lower than they usually are. We're seeing a balance of roughly $133,000. In addition to that, I teamed up with a third-party company and our insurance company to help kind of fight our unemployment claims, because we do get a lot of fraudulent claims for unemployment. So I teamed up with a third party and through our insurance company to help fight those claims. They also have this service to help provide our staff members that are on unemployment to find a new job and come off our unemployment quicker. So all in all, it has helped out and has helped contribute to that balance. In addition, we're saving about $18,000 from our Essex retirement appropriation. For those that remember, that was also incorporated into our FY24 budget. It happened there, and you're seeing the balance again in 23. We do have a vacant crossing guard position, so if you know anyone that's interested in working 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, you can send them my way, because we have absolutely no applicants. As of now, we do not have a budget in our capital acquisition, improvement, replacement, or fixed assets DESE category. Moving on to special education, we're seeing a balance of roughly $297,000. This mainly comes from a bunch of areas, one including our instructional leadership at approximately $71,000. $60,000 of that comes from our out-of-district chair position. So this is another difficult position that we haven't been able to hire all year. We've given up on it, and we're not going to hire it the rest of the year. We've actually removed it from our 24 budget as well. Next one is our teachers DESE category, where we're actually coming in at a negative. This has to do with 2 turnovers in staff that actually came in at higher. The problem here is with special ed is you really need a higher level teacher. These are SLP positions, PT positions that really require more advanced degrees and a bigger skill level, which costs us more than what we anticipated. For our other teaching services, we are actually seeing a reduction again of $47,000. And as I pointed out before, there's the contract for that SLP position at the Winthrop Elementary School. So we couldn't fill that .7 position. As I mentioned before, we had to contract it out. That's why you're seeing the negative over here. And as Eric mentioned earlier, and as I mentioned, under pupil services, we are seeing a deficit of approximately $125,000, which relates directly to our transportation of out-of-district students. This is a combination of three things. It's obviously higher fuel prices, it's higher labor costs for our bus drivers, and it's in addition of 2 routes for 2 new out-of-district students that cost nearly $30,000 per route, which is why in the future we will probably look at kind of running this in-house and seeing if we can reduce any of these costs. Because right now I believe our budget for this is just under $80,000, and we're $800,000, and now we're running $125,000 over. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we're seeing our tuition balance of roughly $427, which again is $272 from additional circuit breaker and a $200,000 balance just from our general enrollment and projection enrollments. Last but not least is technology, where we're seeing a balance of roughly $16,000. This is mainly due to staff turnover and changes again in our senior status and longevity payment, as well as what I call kind of reserve year end. With technology, we buy a lot of our technology in the beginning of the year. Once July 1 hits, we order everything we can, but we try to save a little bit of a balance for in case things happen during the year. So right now they are sitting at about $9,000 in that year-end reserve. However, as the year moves on, and as you've seen in this presentation, we have the funds, so we're most likely gonna release those and let him utilize them. So just to bring it all kind of back to where we are, this is the summary by DAC. Again, when you roll everything together, we're anticipating a balance of roughly $2.2 million, but I'd like to point out that this assumes, again, that we're gonna prepay tuitions at the end of this year for FY24, like I talked about in our Q1 presentation. So what's our recommendation for spending before the year end? We really want to try hard to not end the year like we did last year with $3 million left and deal with the budget cycle and how to figure out what to do with it. So we know there's a lot of projects we have to do across the district. So right now I've tried to develop a list for you that I'm going to briefly talk about. But before we talk about the list, just to go over what this means if you were to approve it. So right now we're projecting about a $2.2 million balance. We have a list here of roughly $570,000 worth of expenses that we'd like to get a head start on. If you were to approve that list, it leaves us with roughly $1.6 million. And as you may remember from my Q1 presentation, I'm recommending that we end the year with this money and we take $773,000 and return it to the towns through our E&D process, just like we did in our 24 budget and just like we did in our 24 budget and our 23 budget. So this relates to the excess Chapter 70 that ended a long time ago for the pandemic. So even if we do all these things, we still have a balance of roughly $870,000 that still gives us room to maneuver for anything if we have to. Okay, so for the projects, as you probably remember in our 24 budget, one of the biggest projects we have out there right now is our district-wide smartboard replacement project. Right now, it's estimated to cost a little bit south of $800,000. So during our 24 budget, we wanted to take a chunk of that away. So as part of our E&D offset, I believe we added another $250,000 for smartboard replacement projects. Since we have this residual balance, we're requesting that we get another chunk taken off and attack that this year as well as next year. That'll put us in a really good place, pretty much 2/3 of replacing everything, and then work out how to get the other 1/3 either through next year's budget or the one after that. In addition, you saw Brian Menegoni give a presentation earlier today for the high school weight room renovation project. Currently, I believe he estimated it was going to cost about $160,000, but he had some other funding sources. I believe he was going to go to the Ed Fund for a little bit of money. He already has a little bit of Ed Fund money left over, as well as asking the boosters to pay for certain segments of the renovation. After you take those things out, we're still left with about $110,000 that we're asking to now fund for him to complete that project. In addition, Alan has notified us that a lot of the teacher laptops that were purchased, I believe, 6 years ago are failing. So he'd like to get a head start and replace a lot of the laptops throughout the district for our teachers, currently estimated to cost roughly $70,000. In addition, we've gotten a lot of requests from teachers to either replace or put in our Red Cat system. Yeah, Eric might be able to explain this one better than me, but I'm going to at least try. It's an audio device that teachers wear to help project their voice throughout the classroom so they don't have to yell. Am I accurate on that?
Sound field amplification systems, yes.
Why are they called Red Cats? Amy and I
No
are
idea.
dying over here.
That's a company name.
The Red Cats.
Oh, Red Cats, yeah.
Like a team.
Wow.
The company's called Lightspeed, actually. The device is Red Cat. We didn't just buy them. But a lot of the ones we have are the batteries are failing, the units themselves are failing. We've had it for years. We've had most of them for probably more than 7 years. So.
Okay. Sounds like something out of Star Wars.
Two other items revolve around our boilers. The high school and the Cutler boilers are, I don't want to say not doing very well, but they are leaking. So Tom has requested some funding to get a technician in there and figure out what is going on and possibly replace some of the seals around it that are causing it to leak. In total, that costs about $40,000. Recently, since I've done this presentation, we've actually discovered a little bit more problems at Cutler. So to be perfectly honest with you, all of this might go to Cutler, and we might divert the high school for now because that's more of a serious issue. But depending on what that technician comes back with, we might update you more later in the year. In addition to that, the Bucher School has requested some money for some furniture. If you remember, I believe in FY 21, we purchased a good chunk of furniture. That went to almost every school except for Bucher. So right now they're requesting money to replace chairs and desks, I believe. And then on top of that, that comes in at roughly $15,000 was the quote that we received. In addition, the multi-purpose room sound system at the middle school goes in and out. The amplifier, I believe, is almost 20 years old, so you can't communicate in the multi-purpose room. If there was an emergency or even in presentations within that room, it comes and it goes. So they've requested that we replace that amplifier that's currently estimated to cost $11,000. The Cutler kiln needs to be relocated, so our insurance company, Maya, has written us up in the report for where it is right now. It is currently in the Cutler boiler room. So that means you gotta walk behind the cafeteria, go down the dirty stairwell into the dark boiler room. This is the art teacher going down there to put the students' art projects in there. We've been noted that it is a hazard and we need to relocate it. So right now, we're requesting $8,000 to move the huge device into another area of the building. The last item is the high school pole and light system at the high school. So there are currently 2 light poles that do not work, and it's in the dark. We need to have the ground ripped up and new electrical run underground. It's currently estimated to cost approximately $7,500. So you add all these projects up, and again, we're looking at about a $572,000 across the district replacement to replace all these projects. So again, even if we approve these projects, even if we dedicate $773,000 to the FY25 budget, that still leaves us with $870,000, which does represent about 2% of our budget, which is really where I always try to aim to end the year in the first place. But again, I want to remind you that this is if we still prepay $1.2 million in tuitions. If we don't do that, that number turns to $2 million again, which brings me to the next thing, approval to prepay tuitions if you so please. And then the next one is the transfer for all those projects I just mentioned. I did break each one of them out in case, for whatever reason, someone was completely against one of them. We could exclude one of them or include other ones. So that is the transfer motion, and that is all, and I will breathe for a minute and take questions. That was
Yeah.
50 minutes.
Yeah, wow.
Thank you, Vinny. Does anyone have questions before we have a motion? David?
Yeah, thank you. That was very thorough. My only question is, has consideration been given to using some of the surplus funds to do a complete removal of all the asbestos that remains? Because we're doing that in little chunks, which is, I understand, not the most cost-efficient way if we did it all at once over summer.
The problem,
Done.
we did consider that, but the problem is with the asbestos, you can't do it while students are there, and all this money
Oh, I
needs to be
understand.
used by June 30th.
Oh.
So therefore, if we were gonna do it over the summer, you can't really use these funds to do that. So
Damn.
sadly, we thought about that, and we're looking into whether or not we can pull that off in the last week in June, but making it such a tight window, we don't entirely anticipate that we could pull that off.
Prepay?
Prepay? Oh, yeah.
Anyway, it's a thought.
Yeah,
It'd be great to be completely rid of it.
Yep.
Thanks.
agreed.
Okay. Anybody else?
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
I think then we would entertain the first motion there.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee authorizes the Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Administration to prepay fiscal year '24 out-of-district tuitions with fiscal year '23 funds not to exceed the amounts established by Mass General Law, Chapter 40, and 4E, and Chapter 71, 71D.
Second.
Seconded by Jen Carr. Is there discussion? Nope. Sounds good. Okay, looks like we're ready to vote. All those in favor? That is unanimous, and the motion passes.
Thank you.
And
Too warm in here.
ready for the next one?
It's too warm in here.
Yes.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School
So we
Committee
open a window.
approves the fiscal year '23 operating expense budget transfers as recommended herein by the Assistant Superintendents of Finance and Administration and as presented on the previous slide entitled Transfers Requested Q2.
Second.
Second by Anna. Are there questions or discussion? Okay, looks like we're ready to vote. All right, yep. Oh, okay, all those in favor? That is unanimous. So, okay, and the motion passes.
Thank you, guys. Sorry it was so long.
Thanks for
Thank you,
being
Vinny.
so
I think
thorough.
we're overpaying the heating in this.
I know, it's hot in here.
It's
That's what we
so
opened
hot
up
down here.
No, I love it. Bring it
Oh.
on.
Love it. Very hot.
Everybody's red-faced right now.
Right. Next is still you, Vinny.
Yeah,
Right?
yep,
Okay.
correct.
Pre-K tuitions.
So we got a email from a concerned citizen that our pre-K tuitions were too low compared to other school districts. But the problem is you can't compare it on the face of it. So just picking Manchester, Essex, not to pick on them, their tuitions are about $3,000 a year. Ours are roughly 6,300, but Manchester Essex students go the 180 school days. Our students only go 175. Manchester Essex students go something like 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock Monday through Friday. Our students only go 8:30 to 2 o'clock Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and on Wednesday it's a half day. So you can't really compare it on the face. So what I did is we sent out inquiries to, I believe, 15 surrounding districts. Only 9 of them answered everything we asked, because not only is the days per year and the hours per day different, but what's your program look like? Is it just a teacher in the room? Is it a teacher and 1 TA? Is it a teacher and 2 TAs? Is it both special ed students and general ed students? So we didn't get all our answers from every single one of those districts. However, we did from 9 of them. So with those 9 districts, when you break it down on an hourly basis, we're right in the middle. But I do realize that we have not increased, or we have not touched our preschool tuitions in at least 7 years. So it's been the same price since FY17 and maybe even earlier. I couldn't find any data on what it cost prior to FY17. So we are recommending that we do set a modest increase to this. So currently our 5-day program costs $6,300, and our 3-day program is $3,700, and our 2-day is $2,520. We are recommending an increase of $450, $350, and $180 to each of those programs. It is a modest increase, and if you look at it, we haven't done that in 7 years. So if you factor it out through the 7 years, it's really only like less than a 1% increase a year. And just a final note, we did run this through Capital at our last Capital meeting, and it was approved through them. So right now, we are just requesting a modest increase to our preschool tuition rates.
Okay, and you need a motion and a vote?
Yes.
Yep.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee increases the preschool tuition rates as outlined in this letter.
Second.
Second by Jen. Oh,
Diana.
I think it's Dana,
Oh.
yeah.
It was me. I faked you out.
okay. Second by Anna, I stand
I need the
corrected.
red cats.
I need the red cats. Okay, is there discussion? Okay, all those in favor? That is unanimous of the 6 members present.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Too late.
Too late.
Okay. All right. Next up, I don't think Capital has anything else. That was, oh, I'm sorry, did I miss something?
No, that was
Yep.
just really it.
I think we did it. We just discussed it. There we go. Okay. Policy. Let's go.
I know it's your favorite part of the meeting every time, the policy subcommittee. We are presenting to you tonight the F section. We had spent a little bit of extra time working through a couple of things that required some legal counsel, and if the committee would allow me to sort of merge in some way, item B, BI and BII, they're sort of related to each other. Can I do that?
Please do.
All right. So, first of all, if you look at the indices for the F section, there are 2 versions of them. And the reason we gave you both is the one in black is what we propose to be the policies we keep. There's another one that is significantly longer. And when we went through the F section, many of them, Eric, I think it might be the next one or even the one before that. No, that's,
I don't think,
it's the 4th one.
There it is.
There you go. So the old version of the F section had all of those, and in our review, many of them are covered in other sections of the new policy manual. In a couple places, we just we just got rid of them. You know, for example, FFE, investment in sites, literally says the school committee will work with the select boards in the selection of sites. I mean, it's just like a nothing burger. So what you have here is the final F policies that we wanted to keep, and one of them is really important, and that's the FF policy. So when the policy subcommittee last looked at this on February 13th, 16th? Very recently.
Yes.
We approved to bring to you tonight one version of FF. Subsequent to our vote on that, the superintendent got updated legal opinion from district council on FF specifically. So there's actually two versions of FF to look at. The second one, which I think Eric is about to pull up, has a suggested edit coming from council. So what this is a suggested edit on the policy that the policy subcommittee looked at a couple weeks ago. This came in between. So if you look at them carefully, the main point of language is the original one we looked at said that the school committee will consider naming opportunities at the next school committee meeting. And district council thought that might have been a little too limiting and has suggested that we would adopt this language for policy FF instead. So I'm happy to take any questions about it, but if you please, we're presenting to you tonight for first reading 4 F section policies, FA, FCB, FF, and FFA. Did I miss anything?
Nope.
Questions?
I have one question. It was for section FFA, memorials for deceased students or staff.
Mm-hmm.
The last point in that bullet list on that page says shrubs, trees, and plantings are discouraged on school grounds.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask why?
Mm-hmm. You want to answer?
Sure.
We talked about that.
We did talk about it. We discussed with Dorothy too, who mentioned that that's usually discouraged by school committees, school districts, because it requires like an ongoing type of maintenance. So it wouldn't necessarily be a one-time thing that's covered by
Can I
funds,
just
so
jump
it-
in?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if, I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'm not sure if what you're asking is, because I don't think the intent is saying that shrubs, trees, and plantings are discouraged in general. They're
No,
staying-
but I mean, even discouraged as memorials kind of seems weird to me.
Well, the other part of it I think we discussed is that a memorial is sort of a point of sadness to begin with, and then if you plant a memorial shrub and then the shrub also dies, that I remember having this conversation
Have a
about the death
memorial
of
for
the
the shrub.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, anyway. So to your point, we did talk about both of those things because we kind of had the same question. So.
Yeah,
Yep.
we had a conversation about a tree specifically. Like,
Yeah.
The best example is we just had to remove one. You have a tree that gets planted 20 years ago for a deceased person, and the tree grows for 20 years, and then all of a sudden gets blight or whatever and rots, and we cut that tree down. There was some expectation that the committee or the school department would replace that tree as a memorial in perpetuity. Right, so that's why
Rock
even
holds
Dorothy
up
was saying it's more
so much
consistent to have
better
a
than living
stone or
tissues.
something permanent rather than something
I
that would
think
die
rocks
off.
are great. Rocks, plaques,
Yeah.
Got it.
piles of granite.
It just seemed unusual for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why I
But I'm
asked.
glad you asked because we had a fun conversation about that.
it feels bad to discourage shrubs and trees.
Yeah.
Makes
I
sense.
I
But
will
I
say, though,
understand
this is, I mean, even in my short time on the committee, this policy has come up.
Yeah. Mhm.
That has been requested, and my personal opinion is that it's a good policy, not to encourage that. Other questions or feedback for?
Does anyone have feedback on the change to FF? Does everyone understand the change to FF and why it had happened?
I don't think I think it actually clarified it.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
I think it's, yeah, I think it's very wise to,
Mhm.
not to, I mean, the reality is, the next school committee meeting might be very problematic to
You
try to,
appreciate the,
Yeah.
hustle
Yeah.
but,
mentality of the original, though.
And
Yeah.
Mark Terry and I went back and forth on this as we were talking about possibilities. We were like, oh, what if this happens? Then what if this happens? He said, you know what, you guys are trapping yourself. So, because initially he had said, policy looks good, it aligns with the MOU. And then we started talking about possibility, and he said, yeah, you could end up in a long, drawn-out debate with somebody.
yeah.
So,
Or you could just logistically be in a situation where the next school committee meeting is, a huge meeting on an important topic that you need, there's a number of reasons it's a good
And
idea.
also, I think that you could have, especially in our current environment where we're fundraising for all these things, you get one pledge gift that wants consideration and you put it on the next agenda, and then a week later you get another gift and now it has to go on the next agenda. You could have a standing agenda item of talking about gifts, which
Yep.
would be,
Um,
yeah.
Okay.
But at that point, if you've already named it in the, maybe now I want to move back. 1 week,
So,
sorry, it's over, bro.
it's over.
Keep hyphenating the
So
name.
Dana, we don't have, we didn't have it on to the vote tonight. It was
Nope.
just a first reading.
Right, so my question was, do we have when do we anticipate bringing them back? When do you guys have a next meeting?
Well, so policy has done its work on this.
So that was
Um,
sort of my question.
So we were not planning to meet again, so I would
can just put 'em
advocate
back.
that we could bring it back to our next meeting on March 16th and
Great.
formally adopt it.
No,
There's no, yeah.
nothing to go back to,
What'd you say?
especially if there's nothing to go back to.
Nope,
definitely.
I just wanted to, okay. Okay. Excellent. Negotiations. We did meet, mostly because, huh?
It's exciting.
It was exciting. We hadn't met in a long time. David, did you?
Yeah, I mean, we just met as the new committee, just to sort of touch base on where we are as a district. There's nothing really coming up at the moment, so there's nothing to discuss, but it's a nice little get-together via Zoom before that goes away. But, yeah, there's no scheduled future meetings or anything at this point.
When do you start the new teacher contract negotiations?
We have another year. That's something we did bring up, but we haven't heard anything. We still have another, basically a year on our contract, so we're not really looking towards, to that for at least, at any point, the teachers union could come to us and say they want to begin the negotiation process, but, we're not looking till next school year, anyway, before that begins.
Thanks.
Okay. And we did elect David to be the chair of negotiations. All right. That's about it. All right. Superintendent's report.
Superintendent's report, okay.
Huh? It's 9:54.
Ready, go.
Superintendent.
Yeah, there's a bunch on the superintendent's report, unfortunately, but it's all good stuff. As you know, we're ending the winter season for our student athletes, and Hamilton Wenham hockey team went to tournament play. They played this evening, unfortunately lost about half an hour ago.
I'm sorry, could you specify the boys or girls hockey
Boys
team?
hockey, thank you. Hamilton
That's a
Wenham boys
good
hockey.
example of inclusive bias.
Girls basketball, they'll play on Saturday. They've got the 22nd seed. Alpine ski is done. They qualified for the championships at Berkshire East, which was Wednesday, and I did not get the results yet. That was my own fault, so I apologize. Girls co-op hockey played last night in tournament play and unfortunately lost in the Division I tournament. And there are a number of notables. Our gymnastics posted a 6-2 record. They earned a spot in the North Sectional Championship for the first time in about a decade. Georgia Graves and Hobie Graves qualified for individual state championships as well. 3 Hamilton Wenham programs earned sportsmanship awards: the girls indoor track, boys hockey, and girls basketball. Brendan Dalton. We have a co-op wrestling team with Salem. Brendan is one of, I think, 3 wrestlers. He earned a league championship based on his finish at the state championship a couple of days ago. He's now qualified for New England's that will occur later this week. That's a big deal. That's a long way to go for a wrestler. Catherine Reed of the swim team qualified for individual state championships. John Ertel of the boys basketball team, winner of the Cape Ann League McCoy Courage Award. So lots going on in athletics. It's been quite a week. It's kind of been boom, 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 boom. And then today at 5 o'clock, Dana and I got to see 13 Ways to Screw Up Your College Interview, which was hilarious. Kids put on, it's a 40-minute play that they do for the states. They go and they get timed on setup, running the play, breaking it down, and getting off stage. And it's part of there are 8 schools that will be competing tomorrow. There are 88 schools in the state that will compete over the weekend. And then they'll continue to break down into two more levels to get to the quote state level to compete. So we'll wish our thespians luck, or break a leg, I guess is the phrase, tomorrow in competition. And that's all I have.
Good luck.
Excellent. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention that the cheer team actually won their.
Oh yeah, the
gonna say,
cheerleaders.
yeah.
Yes,
First place.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Our cheerleaders took first place. That's great.
Excellent. And our student rep did mention that.
Yep.
That's excellent. All right. I feel like we've covered everything I have to say. Topics for future meetings. I already had a topic from David. We'll make sure we discuss at a meeting some of the compilation questions about the evaluation. And we have the policy, Section F policy. Anybody else have anything else for topics for future meetings? Okay. 9:57. I am, and anybody has anything else? Because I'm going to make a motion to move into an executive session. Okay. At this point, I move to adjourn into executive session for purpose number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation. And an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. And not to return to open session.
Second.
Second by Anna, and it is, I believe, a roll call vote to move into executive session. David?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Amy? Yes. Anna?
Yes.
Dana's a yes? Oh, yes.
Yes.
David?
Yes.
All right, and we are adjourned into executive session.